CEO walks into a diner for a quick meal and ends up face-to-face with the waitress who secretly had his child and never told him. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. It was exactly 5:45 p.m. on a bustling Thursday when Jamal Douglas, the young CEO with a name stamped on business magazines, parked his obsidian black sedan outside a modest diner on the city's quieter east side. His usual world was a swirl of glass-walled offices, high-stakes board meetings, and power lunches where even the slightest show of weakness could threaten entire business ventures. Yet tonight, he was drawn to the unlikeliest of places, an unremarkable eatery with neon letters half-lit, a place whose memory had been tugging at him for weeks. Little did he know, this unpretentious diner concealed a secret that would turn his carefully managed life upside down. Jamal's heart thumped harder than he cared to admit as he stepped inside. The bell over the diner door chimed with a gentle tinkle, a humble fan overhead spinning with an almost comforting hum. He remembered that sound. It was the same chime he'd heard 5 years ago on a night he rarely allowed himself to think about. Tonight, something intangible pulled him back. Perhaps it was nostalgia, or the suspicion that he had unfinished business in this place. Seated at a corner table, Jamal scanned the room. A handful of patrons lingered. 2 truckers drinking coffee, a student scribbling in a notebook, and an elderly couple reading the daily specials. He exhaled slowly, telling himself this was just curiosity, nothing more. Then a familiar figure breezed out from behind the counter, carrying a tray of steaming plates. Grace. She wore the same uniform as the other servers, a simple maroon dress with a faded name tag. But something about her presence seemed to illuminate the entire diner. Her hair, once free-flowing around her shoulders, was now pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her cheeks carried a slight flush from having rushed table to table. As she paused at a patron's booth, she lifted her eyes just enough to catch Jamal's gaze. In that moment, the air around them seemed to thicken, and a spark of recognition flared in Grace's eyes. For a split second, a million unspoken questions passed between them. She caught her breath, lost the words she meant to say, and nearly dropped the tray in her hands. Why had he come back here? What was he looking for? It was as though they were both silently asking the same questions. 5 years ago, their lives had briefly collided in this very diner on one fateful night. 5 years ago, Jamal had been a stressed, up-and-coming executive trying to escape a particularly bad day. Grace had just been finishing her shift, listening to him vent about how everything in his life seemed to be an endless cycle of deals and deadlines. They'd wound up talking until closing time and shared more than words. After that night, they never spoke again. "Mr. Douglas," Grace finally managed, setting the tray down on the counter to steady her trembling hands. It felt odd addressing him by his last name, but time and the world they lived in demanded a certain formality. Her voice was tight, layered with shock, embarrassment, and maybe something like regret. "It's been a while." Jamal wanted to respond coolly. He had spent years cultivating a calm, almost stoic persona as a CEO, but his carefully prepared facade cracked the instant he saw her expression. A swirl of memories flooded him. He gave a short nod and tried for a polite, if awkward, greeting. "Grace, you look, well, it's really been too long." Patrons were now glancing over their shoulders, sensing the tension. Unable to bear the weight of all those questioning looks, Grace gestured for Jamal to step behind the diner's partition wall, a quieter area near the payphone and some retro posters. Back there, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting dancing shadows on the linoleum floor. She looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and guarded caution, the way a person might face a gust of wind that threatens to blow apart everything they'd put together. "You came back, after all this time." Her words sounded more like an accusation than a welcome. Jamal rubbed his palm across the back of his neck. He had an explanation. He always did, in business dealings and in personal interactions. But here, for once, the right words failed him. I had business on this side of town. He lied partially, then confessed. And maybe I wanted to see if you were still here. Grace's lips tightened into a line. She looked as though she had 1,000 retorts lined up, but none slipped out. Instead, she sighed and nodded as though in her heart she had always known he might appear one day. How about we step outside? My shift ends in a few minutes. The crisp evening air embraced them as they exited the diner. Standing near a flickering lamppost, they exchanged hesitant glances, while the city's background noise provided a soundtrack of distant traffic and occasional sirens. Up close, Jamal noticed small lines of worry around Grace's eyes. She seemed more mature, less carefree than the bright-eyed waitress he once knew. For Grace, seeing Jamal again was not just unexpected. It was as if she feared that what she'd hidden for years was mere moments from being exposed. I never intended to vanish the way I did, Jamal began, pushing his hands into his pockets to keep them from shaking. Work took over my life. I had family issues. He paused, swallowing. Let's just say I'm sorry. A bitter smile tugged at Grace's lips. She wanted to ask him so many things, like why he hadn't tried to reach out, or how he managed to forget everything that happened that night. But instead she simply said, I understand. Life happens. People move on. They fell silent, an uneasy hush between them. And that could have been the end of this conversation. Maybe Jamal would leave, as he did before, returning to his glittering glass tower. Maybe Grace would finally accept that he was never truly meant to be in her life. But fate, or something akin to it, had other plans. Suddenly, a small voice squealed from the diner entrance. Mom! Mom! Grace froze, her eyes darting from Jamal to the child racing toward them. A little girl of about 4, hair in tiny braids bouncing as she ran. She wore the same curious expression Grace used to have when hearing news stories from late-night customers. Mom. The word echoed in Jamal's ears, collapsing all sense of time. Grace bent down to catch the child in a gentle hug, but her eyes never left Jamal. He stood as if rooted in place, feeling an odd mix of confusion, curiosity, and an inexplicable flutter of excitement. Something about the little girl's face, a fleeting familiarity he couldn't quite place. Grace gently straightened up, a protective edge in her posture. Mia, sweetie, I asked you to wait by Ms. Linda's table, remember? Why'd you run out? The little girl's bright eyes fixated on Jamal. She whispered something into her mother's ear, making Grace's expression tense. Then, Mia offered Jamal a shy smile that lit up her face, as if seeing him awakened an immediate sense of trust. Jamal, his throat suddenly dry, mustered a polite nod. Hi, Mia. She blinked, her gaze shifting between her mother and this mysterious man with fancy clothes. Are you Mommy's friend? The question stabbed the silence with an unexpected intensity. Jamal tried to answer, but no words emerged. He could sense that Grace was on the brink of telling him something crucial, but fear or uncertainty held her back. That's enough, Mia, Grace said, steering her daughter back toward the diner door. I need you to go back inside for just a moment. Let Mommy talk, okay? Mia obediently scampered into the diner, leaving Grace and Jamal alone once more. The lamppost above them buzzed. In that faint illumination, Jamal noticed that Grace's eyes had filled with tears she was fighting to contain. The truth was there, so close to the surface that it felt like an electric current coursing through the air. She's your daughter, Grace whispered, a tremor in her voice. After that night, I tried to find you, but I never got through. I was told you were always out of the country or swamped with deals. You never called, never came back. So I raised her on my own. Jamal's vision blurred momentarily. A father? He, who had never even considered the prospect of children in the midst of his high-octane, career-centric life, was a father of a 4-year-old girl. All the money, power, and success in his world abruptly felt trivial, overshadowed by the magnitude of this revelation. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice trembled. "Grace, I didn't know. If I had—" He paused, realizing how empty words might sound after all she'd endured alone. "I'm so sorry." Grace's shoulders quaked as she tried to keep her composure. "Please," she murmured, "I don't need your pity or your money. Mia and we've managed. But you deserve to know. She deserves to know. I can't keep it hidden any longer. She's at that age where she's starting to ask questions about her dad." Stunned, Jamal closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of fatherhood settle over him. Flashes of Mia's smile, the color of her eyes, the shape of her little nose. Did she look more like him or Grace? Fragments of a future he never imagined played in his mind. Birthdays, bedtime stories, teaching her to ride a bike. A wave of regret crashed into him. He had missed so much already. "I want to be part of her life," he whispered finally, voice cracking. "Please, let me make it right." For a long moment, Grace simply stared at him, uncertain if his words were genuine or if it was just the pang of guilt driving him. Yet there was a softness in Jamal's eyes she had never seen in those high society photos or magazine covers featuring his polished smile. Maybe, just maybe, he meant every word. "There's a lot we need to figure out," Grace replied quietly, her heart pounding. "Everything has changed. Our worlds are totally different now. This isn't going to be easy." "It doesn't have to be easy," Jamal said, swallowing hard. "It just has to be real." He was still the brilliant executive who closed deals worth millions, but in this moment with Grace and Mia, he felt like any ordinary man desperate to make amends, to reclaim lost time. Light from the diner window cast a warm glow behind them, as if inviting them to find solace inside instead of standing out here in the cold. Mia was waiting. The revelation of fatherhood hung between them like an unexpected sunrise, at once terrifying and full of hope. Grace nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "All right," she managed. "We'll talk, but go slow. Mia needs time and so do I." Jamal hesitated, then gently placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. It felt so fragile this moment, as if a single misstep could shatter the delicate possibility of unity. "I promise," he said, letting sincerity guide his tone. As they stepped back into the diner, the overhead bell chimed again, a simple sound that now symbolized a new beginning. Mia looked up from the booth where she'd been sipping a chocolate milkshake and smiled at Jamal. Her eyes shone with childlike innocence and curiosity, unaware of the storm swirling around her. Jamal's heart clenched in both joy and sorrow. How many father-daughter moments had he already missed? He exchanged a look with Grace, who offered him a tentative nod. Slowly, Jamal sat down across from Mia. His pulse pounded as he tried to think of what to say. He felt more out of his depth than he ever had in the boardroom. Mia, excited by his attention, leaned forward with a small giggle, the milkshake straw wobbling in her cup. "Hi," she said softly. "You look like me." Jamal choked back a surge of emotion. He glanced over at Grace, who'd turned away to hide her tears. Though they all had countless questions and uncertainties about how to move forward, a flicker of hope now glowed in the midst of the chaos. And so began the fragile first step toward forging a bond that was years overdue. What none of them could see was the wave of complications waiting just around the corner: family members with strong opinions, business partners who spied an opening, and personal fears that threatened to tear them apart before they'd even truly begun. Yet at that diner table, in the hush of a nearly empty room, they shared a moment of truth that might just become the foundation of something stronger than any contract Jamal had ever signed. Clouds gathered in the evening sky, thick and restless, as if reflecting the uncertainty that had settled over Grace's tiny apartment. once a place of quiet routine, children's books on the shelf, a second-hand couch by the window, the faint smell of lavender air freshener. The small living room now seemed charged with restless energy. Jamal stood near the threshold, attempting to take in every detail. The scuffed coffee table, the faded carpet that Grace had patched herself, and the swirl of Mia's crayons scattered across an old rug. None of these images aligned with the gleaming penthouse suites and corner offices that dominated his everyday life, yet it felt strangely grounding. After the emotional first encounter at the diner, Grace had agreed, somewhat reluctantly, to let Jamal see where she and Mia lived. It wasn't about pity or pride, she had said. It was simply to let him know their reality. Her expression hovered between wary and hopeful, as though every step into this deeper familiarity marked uncertain terrain. Mia, evidently unburdened by the adult tensions swirling around her, beamed with excitement at showing Jamal her treasures. They were scattered in various corners. Hand-drawn pictures taped to the walls, a ragged stuffed bunny missing one eye, a small puzzle collection stacked high in a plastic bin. The little girl's chatter filled the small apartment with a warmth that reminded Jamal of the gap in his own life, a quiet space he had never acknowledged. "You see this, Mr. Douglas?" Mia asked, holding up a poster she'd scribbled with the words, "My Family," in bright pink marker. Jamal blinked at the sight of his own face sketched. At least it looked like a man in a suit, beside Grace and Mia, all of them smiling. The surreal quality of seeing himself included in an image titled "My Family" made his chest tighten. "You can call me Jamal," he managed, his voice softer than usual. "And that's a great picture you made." Standing off to the side, Grace fiddled with the hem of her blouse. For her, this entire situation felt like watching two parallel worlds collide. Part of her was relieved. She had dreaded the possibility of Mia never meeting her father. Yet she couldn't ignore the coil of unease twisting in her stomach. Jamal was used to orchestrating boardroom deals, not reading bedtime stories or factoring in a child's daycare schedule. Could he really adapt to their quieter, humbler existence? Could he understand the daily sacrifices she'd made? From the corner of the living room, a chipped porcelain clock chimed softly, signaling 8:30. The day had raced by, an intense flurry of revelations and new possibilities. Mia, already drowsy from excitement, yawned and rubbed her eyes. Sensing the shift, Grace gently guided her daughter toward the small bedroom they shared. The hallway was lit by a single overhead bulb, and Jamal followed at a respectful distance, noticing that the walls were adorned with Mia's drawings, each one capturing the child's bright imagination. It was a stark contrast to the sleek, minimalist art he had in his city loft. In the bedroom, pastel bed sheets and plush toys surrounded a narrow twin bed where Mia curled up under a patchwork quilt. Grace and Jamal hovered at the doorway. For a moment, Mia peeked out from under the covers with a tiny grin. "Good night, Mommy," she murmured, then glanced shyly at Jamal. "Good night, Jamal." His name, spoken by this small voice that was his daughter, caused 1,000 unspoken emotions to rise. "Good night, Mia," he whispered. After Grace turned off the lamp, they walked back down the short hallway toward the living room. It was there, in the hush of the small apartment, that the magnitude of everything sank in. Grace folded her arms, posture tense. She cleared her throat. "So," she began, her tone guarded, "what happens now?" Jamal inhaled, crossing the room to perch on the armrest of the worn-out sofa. "I don't want to disrupt your life, or Mia's, but if you'll allow it, I'd like to help, in every way. Financially, of course, but also by being present." Pausing, he swallowed, looking around at the peeling wallpaper, the mismatched furniture, the small kitchenette that doubled as a dining area. "I know money doesn't fix everything, but it can give you both some breathing room." Grace's expression flickered, half gratitude and half reluctance. We've managed okay so far, and I've never wanted Mia to feel she's lacking." Her eyes cast downward. In truth, life had been tough. Long hours at the diner, scrimping to pay for Mia's preschool, mending old clothes. Yet she'd always clung to her independence and never once asked for handouts. Jamal stood up, his figure almost too large for the modest space. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I respect you for the work you've done. But please don't shut me out. Let me give my daughter everything she needs. Let me show you I can be here." Those final words carried more weight than either of them realized. The unspoken pain of 5 lost years lingered, but behind it was a longing, an earnest plea. Grace exhaled, tension leaking from her shoulders. "All right, but on my terms. Mia's never known life any other way. If you storm in with your—" She gestured vaguely, thinking of his suits, his brand-new car, the unimaginable corporate world he commanded. "Your power and money and everything, she might feel overwhelmed." "I'll be careful," Jamal promised. There was a steadiness in his gaze that hadn't been there before, a sincerity that momentarily reminded Grace of the young man who'd confided in her years ago about his overbearing father, his need to prove himself, the nights he spent alone in a strange city. That night's connection had been so real, so warm, until he slipped away and never returned. She nodded, though her heartbeat still pounded with anxiety. Let's figure it out as we go." A fleeting silence fell, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchenette. Jamal felt an inexplicable desire to stay, to help Grace with the leftover chores, to tuck Mia in a second time just to memorize every feature of her face. Instead, he took a hesitant step toward the door. "I don't want to keep you up," he said, glancing at the time on his phone. "You work tomorrow, right?" "Yes, early shift." Grace rubbed her temple. "Running on fumes, honestly, but that's normal for me. I can drive you both to the diner in the morning, pick you up? Or is that too soon?" Grace mulled it over. An offer of a ride to work seemed so ordinary, yet for them it was loaded with deeper meaning, acceptance, vulnerability, a sign of trust. "We usually catch the bus," she replied after a moment, "but maybe tomorrow, sure. That would be fine." Jamal's relief was palpable, a small but meaningful invitation into their routine. "Then I'll be here at 7 sharp." The apartment's old door squeaked as he opened it, and the corridor's light flickered overhead. Grace followed him out to the narrow landing. Darkness filled the hallway with only a weak bulb at the far end near the stairs. Abruptly, the hush between them became thick with unsaid words. Should they say goodnight casually, or was that too formal? Should they hug, or was that too intimate? Finally, Grace extended her hand, an almost businesslike gesture. "Thank you for coming here, for meeting Mia properly. She's been asking questions. Now at least I can tell her something real." Jamal gently took her hand. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I'm sorry for every question you had to answer alone, Grace. I won't let you do it alone again." The warmth of his grasp lingered a second longer than expected, but Grace pulled away politely, heart pounding. "Drive safe, Jamal." Outside, the night air felt cooler than before. He headed down the worn steps, and a swirl of city noises enveloped him. When he glanced over his shoulder, he noticed Grace quietly shutting the door, the faint overhead bulb illuminating her face. Once, he might have called after her, asked her to walk him out. But now, everything felt precarious, as though one misstep could fracture the fragile new bridge they were building. He slipped into his sleek sedan, the engine's purr contrasting sharply against the chipped sidewalks and rusted street signs. As he pulled away from the curb, he couldn't shake the image of Mia's innocent eyes and Grace's tired but resolute smile. His phone buzzed, messages piling up from board members, alerts about tomorrow's corporate meetings. The two worlds clashed in his mind, the high-stakes realm of mergers and acquisitions, and the everyday challenges of a mother and her daughter getting by paycheck to paycheck. He wondered if he was truly prepared to balance them both. He wondered how his colleagues would react if they discovered he had a child he'd never mentioned, or how the media might spin that story if it came to light. More than that, he wondered how to be a father to a little girl who'd grown up without him. But overshadowing all those questions was a flicker of fierce resolve. He would find a way, no matter how complicated, to be in Mia's life. Grace, meanwhile, slumped against the door after locking it. She let out a shaky exhale, pressing her palms over her eyes. The swirl of memories from the diner years ago rushed back. She recalled Jamal's awkward jokes, the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about feeling lonely in a city that worshipped only ambition, and how that vulnerability had pulled her in. Now she had let him into her and Mia's home, into their carefully guarded existence. A tingle of apprehension curled in her stomach. Yet there was also hope, fragile and persistent, that maybe, just maybe, this time he would stay. Half an hour later, Grace tiptoed back into Mia's room. The child was fast asleep, the gentle rise and fall of her small chest visible in the blue glow of a nightlight. Sitting on the bed's edge, Grace stroked Mia's hair and marveled at the turn their life had just taken. Tomorrow, Jamal would be there at 7 o'clock to drive them both. It was a simple act, but it carried the potential to reshape everything. Gazing at Mia's peaceful face, Grace felt tears prick her eyes. She wasn't sure if they were tears of relief or fear. What she did know was that this moment, like so many others, was for Mia. If letting Jamal in meant giving Mia the father she deserved, then Grace had to find the courage to risk it, no matter how uncertain or daunting the path ahead seemed. In the darkness, time felt suspended, as though the night itself held its breath, waiting to see what would blossom from these new beginnings. Behind a modest wooden door in a small apartment, a young mother watched over her child, and somewhere, a driven CEO pondered a life he never knew he wanted. The hours ticked by in quiet transformation. Tomorrow at sunrise they would step forward into a future neither had anticipated, a future in which a secret child was no longer hidden away, and a father's voice could finally say, "Good morning," in person. Morning light crept into Grace's apartment with a warm, hazy glow. She blinked awake before her alarm had a chance to ring, as though her body sensed that this day would be unlike any other. For a brief moment, she forgot the shifts in her life, forgot that Jamal was back, forgot the promise he'd made to arrive at 7 o'clock sharp. But then Mia's giggle echoed from the little bedroom, and everything rushed into focus. With a feeling half anticipation, half nervousness, Grace swung her feet off the sofa. She'd fallen asleep there after an anxious night of tossing and turning in her bed, mind spinning over how quickly her life had pivoted. Now it was 6:10 a.m. according to the squeaky wall clock. She had roughly 50 minutes before Jamal knocked on her door, or perhaps before he sent a text saying something came up and he couldn't make it. The possibility filled her with a pang she tried to push aside. Her daughter's silhouette appeared in the narrow hallway. Mia was already dressed in her favorite leggings and a bright yellow shirt with a unicorn print, a broad smile on her face. Even in the early hour, the child practically glowed, exuding an infectious energy that reminded Grace why she always chose hope over fear. "Mommy, do I look nice?" Mia asked, spinning around to show off her outfit. Grace ruffled Mia's hair with affectionate laughter. "Beautiful as always, sweet pea, but let's fix your braids. They're a little crooked." Mia giggled, wrinkling her nose in delight. "Hurry, Mommy, or we'll be late, and Jamal might leave." Grace's fingers paused mid-braid. The subtle excitement in Mia's voice, just hearing the name Jamal, stirred an unsteady mix of emotions. So soon, Mia was enthralled by the idea that her father might drive her to preschool. Yet it was also a reminder of how carefully Grace had to guide this. If Jamal flaked out, If he disappointed her, Mia's world could collapse all over again. Grace took a breath. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm sure he'll wait if we're a little late." A hurried 20 minutes later, Grace had pulled her hair into a functional ponytail, slid on her most comfortable work shoes, and gathered Mia's tiny backpack. She set out a quick breakfast, milk for Mia, black coffee for herself. The seconds ticked by in a kind of anxious, slow motion. She found her gaze flicking repeatedly to the window facing the street. Then came the soft rumble of an engine, the silhouette of a sleek car pulling up to the curb outside. Grace's heart thumped once, twice. It was 6:57 a.m., early. "Mommy, that's him!" Mia squealed, pressing her face to the window. In a flurry of motion, Grace grabbed her purse, her keys, and Mia's hand, then headed for the door. The corridor felt narrower than usual as they descended the creaky stairs. Grace's stomach twisted, the air thick with her private concerns. Would it be awkward? Would Jamal try too hard or not try at all? But the moment they stepped outside, Mia yanked free of her mother's grasp and bolted toward the black sedan, cheeks flushed with happiness. Jamal emerged from the driver's seat wearing a crisp button-down shirt, no suit jacket, just a casual but still unmistakably upscale look. Grace had never known him to appear anything less than polished. But the surprise was in his expression, a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes when Mia hopped around him, chattering excitedly about riding in his car. "Good morning," he said to Grace, voice subdued. "Hope I'm not too early. I wanted to make sure I beat traffic." "You're right on time," Grace managed, smoothing Mia's hair as the child whirled with enthusiasm. Jamal opened the back door, helping Mia climb in. The inside of the car smelled of leather and mild cologne, a far cry from the musty seats of the city bus Grace was used to. She settled Mia in, then slid into the front passenger side with a quiet exhale. "You look nice," Jamal commented as he started the ignition. The compliment, though simple, came out sincere rather than perfunctory. "Thank you," Grace replied softly. She looked down at her plain uniform blouse, a maroon top embroidered with the diner's logo. Though it was perfectly neat, it was hardly fashionable, but the way he said it made her cheeks warm. Mia leaned over from the back seat. "Jamal, do you have a radio? Mommy and I like to sing songs." Jamal chuckled, adjusting the knob. "We sure do. Which station do you like?" The conversation flowed easier than Grace expected. Mia giggled as Jamal searched for a children's music channel, eventually landing on a peppy tune about farm animals. The little girl sang loudly, missing half the words, while Grace glanced sideways at Jamal, noticing how his posture relaxed with every second spent listening to his daughter's squeals of delight. They drove through the winding city streets, sun rays glinting off mirrored office towers. Jamal was cautious behind the wheel, checking the rearview mirror often, as if double-checking that Mia was still there, that this moment was real. "So, Mia," he said, pausing at a stoplight, "what do you like best about preschool?" Her answer tumbled out in an excited flurry. "Arts and crafts. My teacher, Ms. Linda, says I'm good at drawing. And we have story time and a big playground with a slide." He couldn't help but laugh gently. "Maybe you can show me your drawings sometime." "Okay," Mia beamed. "You can come for a parent visit day if Mommy says yes. Parents sit in little chairs, it's funny." Grace froze, uncertain how to respond. She'd never considered inviting Jamal to any of Mia's school events, though, to be fair, she never had the chance. But hearing Mia talk so openly about parent visit day struck her with a pang of guilt and regret. Maybe it was time to rewrite the rules. Jamal glanced over at Grace, looking as if he was about to ask for permission. Before he could, Mia chimed again. "He can come, right, Mommy?" Grace's hand tightened on her purse. "Sure," she said at length. "I think that could be arranged." Mia squealed, clapping her hands. As the car turned onto a quieter neighborhood street, Grace guided Jamal toward the small building where she dropped Mia each day. Under a colorful sign reading Little Blossoms Preschool, Mia unbuckled, eager to jump out. "I'll walk her in," Grace said. "You can wait." But before she could finish, Mia insisted on holding Jamal's hand as well. Grace half expected him to look uncomfortable, but he quietly exited the car, locking it behind him, and followed them inside. The entrance to Little Blossoms was bright and child-friendly, with paintings of flowers and rainbows. The walls displayed finger-painted collages and Polaroid photos of giggling kids. Mia pointed them out to Jamal, naming some of her classmates. Grace felt a knot in her stomach as Ms. Linda, her daughter's teacher, appeared from behind a stack of colorful mats. The older woman's eyebrows arched in surprise at the sight of Jamal. She had never seen Mia's father, not once in all these years. Mia, unself-conscious, performed introductions. "Ms. Linda, this is Jamal. He's my daddy." The word rang through the modest hallway. Grace's breath hitched. Before, Mia had always called him my friend or mommy's friend, but that single word, daddy, changed the dynamic in a heartbeat. Ms. Linda's face registered shock, then politely shifted to a welcoming smile. "Well, hello," Ms. Linda said, her tone light. "It's nice to meet you. Mia is a delight in class." Jamal offered a respectful nod, though a flicker of emotion crossed his features. "Nice to meet you too," he murmured. "Mia talks about how much she loves it here." The teacher gave Grace a quick, questioning glance, but Grace merely nodded, praying Ms. Linda would let the matter rest. She did, evidently deciding that was enough conversation for now. "We have a busy day, Mia," Ms. Linda said, ushering her gently. "Go ahead and find your cubby." With a bright wave and a skip, Mia darted off to join her classmates. Jamal lingered, absorbing the environment. Child-sized chairs, bulletin boards pinned with shiny stars, and an easel in the corner for painting. A realm he'd never stepped into. Grace touched his elbow lightly. "Thanks for helping us get here. I appreciate it." Jamal turned, searching her expression as if to read her deeper feelings. "I'm grateful you're letting me," he admitted. "I know it's an adjustment." She thought of all the nights she'd ridden the bus to drop Mia off, then hop another to the diner, always hustling to keep up with her shift. She thought of the afternoons she had to beg a neighbor to grab Mia if she was running late. This moment, though simple, was an act of shared responsibility she had never experienced before. But Grace couldn't let herself get too comfortable. Nothing about their situation was simple. She offered Jamal a small smile. I need to be at the diner in about 10 minutes. You sure you have the time to drop me off?" He nodded, glancing at his watch. "I can manage. My first meeting isn't until 9. They walked back out to the car in near silence. Grace's mind buzzed with questions. Should she talk to him about next steps or remain quiet? Should she bring up child support or let him handle that alone? Would he volunteer to pick Mia up too? Or was that too big a step? Eventually, they climbed into the sedan. The engine hummed to life, merging again onto the main road. Her reflection flickered in the tinted window, superimposed over the passing city blocks. Jamal broke the quiet first. "So how long is your shift today?" 8 hours, Grace said. "I usually wrap up around 4, sometimes 5 if they need me for extra tables." A pause. "Would you mind if I pick Mia up from preschool?" he offered, his voice cautious. "Get some time with her before you get home?" Grace's pulse skittered. That was exactly the scenario she'd been spinning in her head, uncertain if it was feasible, if she could trust him to be there. She hesitated, remembering the unwavering delight in Mia's eyes when she discovered she actually had a daddy. Could Grace sabotage that by being overprotective? But every motherly instinct pressed in on her. "I suppose that's okay if you're sure you can handle your schedule. The preschool staff won't release her to anyone they haven't met, though. You might need to fill out some forms, emergency contact things." He nodded. "I'll do whatever they require. I'll bring the right ID, sign the papers, if you're comfortable with it." She took a breath. "Yes, I think it's good. Just keep me in the loop." The rest of the drive slipped by in a mixture of cautious conversation about daily logistics, Mia's bedtime, what she liked for snack, which nights Grace worked late. Every detail felt new to Jamal, an intimate look at fatherhood he'd never glimpsed before. In front of the diner, he parked beside a curb where chipped paint spelled "No Standing" in faded letters. Grace busied herself collecting her bag. Her shift loomed, but so did 1,000 unspoken complexities. Finally, she braced herself and looked at Jamal. "Thank you for this morning. It was nice having help," she said quietly, the vulnerability in her voice plain. He offered a gentle nod. "I want to do more, Grace. I really do. Let me prove that I'm serious about staying involved." She studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes, and her heart twisted with a mixture of hope and residual caution. "One day at a time," she murmured. He leaned over, just enough to open her car door from the inside. She caught the faintest whiff of cologne. "Have a good shift." Stepping onto the sidewalk, Grace closed the door and waved as Jamal's car blended back into traffic. The diner's neon sign sputtered overhead, the morning crowd just starting to trickle in. She stood there for a moment, grappling with an emotion that felt akin to relief. A sliver of light had cracked open in her life, and for the first time in years, she dared to believe that maybe she wasn't alone in caring for Mia. Still, she reminded herself as she pushed the diner door open, life had taught her caution. Jamal's grand gestures wouldn't matter if he vanished again at the first sign of difficulty. So she swallowed a tremor of doubt, smoothed her uniform, and stepped behind the counter. The clang of plates and the aroma of brewing coffee enveloped her senses. This was her domain, her routine, and for now, that was enough. Except this routine was changing faster than she could brace for. And by 4 o'clock, Jamal would be walking into Mia's preschool, greeting their daughter with a smile that might alter everything she thought she knew about being a single mom. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the preschool's colorful windows, gleaming on the bright children's art that adorned the walls. When Jamal pushed through the door, he felt an odd mixture of excitement and nerves. The last time he'd picked anyone up from anywhere, it was typically a high-profile client at an airport or VIP lounge. Certainly nothing involving crayons, plastic cubbies, or the high-pitched chatter of toddlers. Yet here he was, strolling in with a determined air, ready to see his daughter. A receptionist with a warm smile greeted him. Behind her, in the glassed-in main office, rows of child-sized coats hung on hooks. "Good afternoon. May I help you?" Jamal cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. I'm here to pick up Mia Adams." It was a moment before he realized Grace had given Mia her own last name, Adams rather than Douglas. Of course, Jamal thought, trying to ignore the pang. Mia was hers before she was ever his. The receptionist picked up a clipboard. "Oh, Mia! Right. Do you have an ID on you?" He nodded and handed over his license, recalling how Grace had warned him about the preschool's strict rules. The receptionist compared his ID to a note Grace had left that morning, a signed letter giving Jamal permission to pick Mia up. Satisfied, she handed him a visitor sticker. "Please wait in the hallway, Mr. Douglas. Ms. Linda is bringing the children from story time." Jamal thanked her, affixing the sticker to his shirt. As he walked toward the small hallway decorated with handprint art, an unexpected wave of anxiety fluttered in his chest. He'd been in countless high-pressure meetings, facing down investors, negotiating impossible deals, but waiting here for Mia felt strangely more critical, more personal. A door opened and Ms. Linda emerged, leading a line of children like a parade of tiny explorers. Mia was in the middle, chatting animatedly with 2 classmates. The moment she spotted Jamal, she lit up with a grin. "Daddy!" The word felt like a small explosion in Jamal's chest, bursting with both pride and heartbreak. He was still getting used to that term, and he suspected he always would. Before he could respond, Mia dashed forward and threw her arms around his legs, nearly toppling him off balance. He laughed, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey there, kiddo. Did you have fun today?" "Uh-huh. We drew pictures of animals, and then Miss Linda read a story about a magic turtle," Mia reported breathlessly. She glanced at Ms. Linda, who had come over to greet them. "Nice to see you again," Ms. Linda said politely, still with that curious flicker in her eyes. Jamal dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Thank you. And, thanks for taking good care of Mia." He bent down to help Mia slip into her tiny backpack, noticing how the other children gazed at him with interest, and how Ms. Linda seemed faintly amused by Mia's enthusiasm. As they headed toward the exit, Mia kept chattering, her hand securely in Jamal's. They passed the reception desk, where the staff waved goodbye. Stepping outside, they were met by a mild, sunlit afternoon, one of those days where the city's harshness softened under a warm breeze. In the parking lot, Jamal unlocked the sedan and ushered Mia inside. From the back seat, she bounced in excitement, regaling him with stories of her day, who she sat next to at snack time, which kid got a gold star for good behavior, and so on. He merged into traffic, giving short, amazed responses to Mia's rapid-fire narration. Half of him tried to drive carefully, while the other half could hardly believe this moment was real. His daughter in his car, a bundle of life and curiosity. "Are we going to see Mommy at the diner?" Mia asked after a pause, her voice tinged with hope. "Your mom's shift ends in about an hour. She'll be home at, well, about 5 or so," Jamal answered, remembering the schedule Grace had mentioned. "I asked her if it was okay for us to hang out at your place or the park while we wait for her." Mia clapped her hands. "The park! They have swings!" Jamal smiled, relieved. "Then the park it is." He turned onto a quieter side street and found the small park Grace had described, a modest patch of green near their neighborhood, with a few picnic tables and a playground structure. When he pulled up, Mia's face pressed eagerly to the window. Tiny squeals of delight escaped her as she saw the bright yellow slide and the rows of swings. They got out, and Jamal locked the car, guiding Mia toward the playground. A handful of parents and kids were around, but it wasn't crowded. Mia broke into a run, heading straight for the swings. "Push me, Daddy!" There it was again, that magic word that almost knocked the breath out of him. "Sure," he said, walking over slowly. He wasn't entirely sure how to be playful with a child, not after years of burying himself in corporate tasks. But Mia's eagerness made it easier. She plopped onto a swing, legs dangling, a wide grin alight on her face. Jamal gave the swing a gentle push. Mia giggled, urging him to push harder, so he did. Carefully, but enough to send her flying forward and back, ponytails bouncing. Each burst of laughter that escaped her felt like a gift. He found himself chuckling, too, relaxing in a way he couldn't recall doing in years. "You're so tall!" Mia exclaimed on one upswing. "You can probably push me super high." He adjusted his stance, giving another gentle shove. "Not too high. Mommy will kill me if I let you go flying into space." Mia giggled, the kind of unrestrained joy only children possess. Mommy's the best, but she can be overprotective. That's what she says about herself. She says, "Mia, I only have you, so I have to protect you extra good." Those words tugged at Jamal's heart. Grace had been doing all of this alone, the push and pull of motherhood, the worries, the small daily joys. He glanced around at the other parents chatting and occasionally sharing glances that said, "Who's the new dad?" But he didn't mind their curiosity. Let them look. Let them see Mia is not alone now. After a while, Mia jumped off the swing, with more enthusiasm than skill, nearly falling face first, then dragged Jamal to the monkey bars, the slide, and finally the sandbox. He followed her lead, pulling her up carefully whenever she got stuck. At one point, he noticed a mother nearby giving him a sympathetic smile. Perhaps she recognized the mix of excitement and uncertainty in his face, the hallmark of a parent thrown into the deep end. When Mia's energy began to wane, they settled onto a wooden bench in the shade. Mia sipped from her water bottle, cheeks rosy from play. "Can we get Mommy a surprise?" she asked suddenly. Jamal blinked. "A surprise? Like, what?" "Maybe a flower. She loves flowers. But we can't buy a big one. I don't think I have money," Mia added, patting her empty pockets. He laughed. "Well, I might have some. We could pick out a small bouquet on the way home if you want." Mia nodded eagerly. "Yes, please. Then Mommy will be happy she doesn't have to buy her own flowers. She always says she can't afford fresh ones too often." A lump rose in Jamal's throat. The idea that Grace couldn't indulge in a simple bouquet of flowers stung him more than he wanted to admit. He was used to extravagant gifts, lavish parties, and never worrying about everyday costs. This was a reminder of how different their worlds were. They left the park soon after, stopping by a local grocery store where Mia carefully selected a modest arrangement of daisies. She was solemn about the choice, pointing at the yellow ones in particular because Mommy likes bright colors. Jamal paid for them, heart twisting at the reality that neither Grace nor Mia had such small luxuries often. By the time they approached Grace's apartment, it was a bit past 5. The sun was beginning to mellow, sending slanted rays across the street. Mia hopped out of the car, clutching the flowers. Jamal grabbed her backpack, then they headed upstairs. In front of the worn wooden door, Mia knocked loudly. A shuffle sounded from inside, and then it opened. Grace, still wearing her maroon diner blouse and looking tired but instantly brightening at the sight of Mia, and Jamal right behind her. "Hi, Mommy!" Mia cried, thrusting the bouquet forward. "Surprise! Look what we got you!" Grace's eyes filled with surprise and something like gratitude. She pressed a palm to her chest. "Oh my goodness, thank you! They're beautiful!" Mia grinned. "Jamal helped me pick them. We saved the best ones for you." Jamal hovered by the doorway, unsure if he should come in uninvited. Grace gestured him inside with a nod, hugging Mia. "Go set your bag down, sweetie. I'll put these flowers in some water." As Mia scampered off, Grace carefully pulled the flowers close, inhaling their mild fragrance. She looked at Jamal, her expression caught between thanks and vulnerability. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured. He shrugged lightly. "It was Mia's idea. We just wanted you to have something nice." Something unreadable flickered in her gaze. Sadness, regret, gratitude. "Well, I appreciate it," she said softly. "So how was it? Picking her up? Everything go okay?" A fond smile tugged at Jamal's lips. "It was incredible. She's a ball of energy." Grace laughed lightly. "That she is. Thank you for spending the afternoon with her." He hesitated, noticing how tired she looked. A subtle slump to her shoulders, maybe. "You must be exhausted. Want me to take Mia out for a little longer so you can rest?" Grace, in the middle of filling a glass vase with water, paused. She turned to face Jamal more fully. "I'd like to have dinner with both of you. If you're free," she added, almost apologetically. "I can cook something simple." Jamal's surprise must have shown because she blushed slightly. "It's just spaghetti," she said quickly. "But Mia likes it, and I have enough for 3 if you want to stay." He swallowed, touched by the invitation. "I'd love to," he said, trying to keep the gratitude from overwhelming his tone. As Grace busied herself in the tiny kitchen, Jamal took in the apartment's details again, the worn furniture, the carefully mended curtains, Mia's drawings taped to the walls. It felt lived in, cozy even. Mia flipped through a coloring book on the couch, glancing up occasionally to beam at him. No business calls, no urgent emails, no to-do list that overshadowed this moment. Jamal realized he wanted to freeze time here, in this modest apartment, and just exist with his daughter and the woman who had carried so much on her own. Grace's voice floated in from the kitchenette. "Dinner will be ready in a few. Mia, you can wash up and get ready to eat." Mia hopped off the couch, dashing into the bathroom. Jamal moved closer to the kitchen where Grace was stirring sauce in a dented pot. "Need any help?" he offered. She eyed him with a half-smile. "Do you even know how to chop onions?" He chuckled, a bit embarrassed. "I can learn?" With a brief laugh, she handed him a cutting board and an onion. Carefully, she showed him how to slice it without risking a finger. It was a small, mundane task, but Jamal found it strangely comforting, being side by side, the tang of onion in the air, the hiss of pasta water. He peered at Grace, watching as she moved with a familiar ease in the cramped kitchen. "You make this look easy," he said quietly. She shrugged, gaze fixed on the pot. "Cooking for Mia and me. Well, I do it every day. You get used to it." He nodded, absorbing the unspoken truth. She'd never had help, never had someone to lean on. A pang of regret pricked him again, but it mingled with admiration for her resilience. Minutes later, dinner was ready. Plates of spaghetti with tomato sauce, a modest salad, and store-bought garlic bread warmed in the oven. They settled around the small table, Grace and Mia side by side, Jamal across from them. The table barely fit 3 plates, but they made do, nudging a pile of coloring books aside to create space. Mia dug in with enthusiasm, noodles dangling off her fork, spouting random comments about how her crayons broke earlier or which classmate said something silly. Grace listened with the attentiveness of a parent who's used to being both breadwinner and confidant. Yet tonight, Jamal was there too, laughing at Mia's anecdotes, encouraging her to talk more. In that tiny act, Grace felt a faint warmth spread through her chest. She cast Jamal a thankful glance. If anyone had told her even a week ago that she'd be sharing a homemade meal with Jamal, her child's father who had once disappeared, she would have laughed bitterly. But here he was, carefully spinning spaghetti around his fork, nodding along to Mia's chatter. When dinner ended, Grace moved to collect the plates, but Jamal stood. "Let me wash up," he offered. "You've been working all day." Grace opened her mouth to argue, but paused. Having someone willing to do the dishes was a luxury she never experienced. "Okay," she said softly. "Thanks." Mia stretched her arms above her head, feigning a dramatic yawn. "Mommy, can I watch a cartoon?" Grace nodded. "Just a short one, then bedtime. You have school tomorrow, remember?" Mia scampered to the living room, switching on the small TV. Jamal carried the dishes into the kitchenette, rolling up his sleeves. Soap, water, the clink of plates. It was another routine moment that felt, inexplicably, monumental. Grace lingered, drying the plates as Jamal washed them, a comfortable quiet between them. Occasionally they shared quick smiles. When the last dish was placed in the drainer, Grace pressed her lips together. "Listen," she ventured, "I appreciate everything you did today for Mia. I'm not used to help." He glanced at the soapy water in the sink, then at her. "I know," he said simply, "but I want to be here, Grace. I want to share the load. I realize you have every right not to trust me completely yet, but—" "Stop," she interrupted, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "I do trust that you mean well. It's just going to take time. But I can see how Mia's face lights up around you. I can see you're making an effort. Thank you." In the living room, the cartoon's happy theme song floated in. Mia giggled at something on screen. Jamal's eyes flicked that way, his expression softening. "She's incredible, Grace," he murmured. I missed so much of her life." Grace swallowed a surge of sympathy. As frustrated as she'd been with him, she couldn't pretend not to see his genuine remorse. "Well," she managed, "you're here now." They both fell silent, aware that this was just one moment in a long journey. Grace tried to ignore the stirrings of hope in her heart. It was too soon to let it blossom fully. Still, tonight was a glimpse of a life she'd secretly envisioned. Mia, content, herself, not alone. A family of sorts, though fragile and new. Soon, bedtime arrived. Grace coaxed Mia away from the TV, helping her change into pajamas. Jamal stood nearby, unsure if he should leave or stay until she was tucked in. Grace noticed his hesitation. "Mia," she said, "would you like Jamal to read you a story?" Mia's eyes lit up. "Yes, I have a princess book, or a dinosaur one, or—" Jamal chuckled softly. "Dinosaur, definitely." They all moved to Mia's small bedroom, the overhead light casting a cozy glow. She rummaged through a stack of picture books, eventually handing him one with a roaring T-Rex on the cover. With a wry smile, he sat at the edge of the bed. Grace stood by, arms folded, observing as Mia snuggled under the covers, eyes alight with anticipation. Jamal cleared his throat, focusing on the pages. He began reading, stumbling slightly over the playful rhymes about prehistoric creatures stomping and chomping. Mia giggled at his dramatic roars. Grace found herself smiling at the earnestness he poured into each line. When the story ended, Mia's eyelids drooped. Jamal tucked the book aside, brushing a gentle hand over her hair. "Good night, Mia," he whispered. She peered up at him drowsily. "Good night, Daddy." Grace's throat tightened at the tender exchange. A part of her wanted to linger and relish the scene, but Mia's heavy eyelids fluttered shut. Quietly, she and Jamal left the room, turning off the light except for a small night light that glowed at the corner. In the living room, the faint hum of evening traffic drifted through the windows. Jamal checked his watch, nearly 9. "I should head home," he said gently. Grace walked him to the door. Tension, quiet and unspoken, swirled between them again. When he turned to her, his gaze was direct yet tentative. "Today was special," he said. "Thank you for letting me see this part of Mia's life, and yours." She nodded, heart pounding. "Thank you for being there. I'll keep you posted on Mia's schedule." He nodded. "I'd like to see her tomorrow, if that's okay. I can pick her up from school again, or whatever works." There it was. Evidence that he intended to be consistent. Grace felt a ripple of relief. "Okay," she breathed. "That's fine." They exchanged a smile that felt both shy and hopeful. Then Jamal slipped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him. For a moment, Grace leaned her back against the door, pressing a hand to her chest. In just a matter of days, her life had shifted course. She still didn't know how to reconcile it all, how to let Jamal in without dreading the possibility of him vanishing. But each small step, each small kindness, was building a path forward. In the nearby bedroom, Mia slept, secure in the knowledge she now had a father who read dinosaur stories and gave her rides to preschool. And in another part of town, Jamal would return to his upscale apartment, his corporate empire, forever changed by the presence of a little girl who called him Daddy. Neither Grace nor Jamal could guess what challenges awaited or how deeply the past might come back to test them. But for this moment, the night air felt peaceful. The light of a new day seemed ready to dawn, and in its glow a young CEO and a once lonely waitress might finally learn how to become a family. Moonlight cut across the city skyline, reflecting off sleek office windows and crowded apartment blocks, touching them with silver. Even at this hour, downtown buzzed with nightlife, bars and upscale restaurants spilling patrons onto the sidewalks. But on the 15th floor of a newly built glass tower, Jamal Douglas stood in his spacious penthouse living room, staring at a stack of paperwork he had barely touched. His usual routine would have him finalizing reports or answering urgent emails from partners overseas, but tonight, the numbers and words blurred together. His thoughts kept drifting to Mia's bright laughter, Grace's soft smile over dinner, and the simple way it felt to do dishes side by side. He closed the thick folder with a sigh, shrugging off the suit jacket he'd put on after leaving Grace's apartment. Suddenly, wearing it felt too formal, too symbolic of the distance he'd once maintained from them both. Tossing the jacket onto a nearby chair, he ran his hands over his face, exhaustion mingling with a curious sense of contentment. Just then, his phone vibrated, a discreet buzz he'd set for after hours. Expecting a work message, he was surprised to see an incoming text from Grace. "Thank you again for everything today. Mia went to sleep talking about dinosaurs. I appreciate you making time for her, and for me." Jamal found himself smiling, the tension in his chest easing at the sight of those words. He typed back, "I'm glad she enjoyed the story. It was my pleasure, really. Let me know what time works tomorrow. I can pick her up again if that's okay." The reply came quickly, as if Grace had been waiting. "That would be helpful. She finishes at 3 p.m. I work until 5 or 6, depending on how busy the diner is. Thank you." "You got it," Jamal typed, and a second later added, "Good night, Grace." He stared at the screen for another moment, half wishing he could say something else, something that captured the swirl of emotions in him, but he settled on leaving it at that. If this new dynamic was fragile, he didn't want to crowd it with more than they could handle. Setting the phone aside, he wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the panorama of glittering city lights. A vantage point he'd once cherished for reminding himself of his achievements now felt somewhat empty. Sure, the penthouse was sleek, decorated with minimalist art and furnished with the best money could buy, but after just a few days of stepping into Grace's humble world, the luxury here felt oddly hollow. He spotted his reflection, tall, immaculate posture, the direct gaze of a CEO, but within that reflection, he could sense the stirrings of vulnerability he hadn't acknowledged in years. How quickly life could change when the missing piece turned out to be a 4-year-old girl and a woman he'd never truly forgotten. Morning at Grace's apartment began with the same routine: Mia's enthusiastic chatter, cereal bowls clinking in the cramped kitchen, and Grace's quiet presence floating from one task to another. And yet the air seemed lighter. "Don't forget to take your library book," Grace called, watching Mia slip it into a backpack covered in stickers. "Are we riding the bus?" Mia asked, craning her neck to peer out the window. Grace glanced at the clock. It was still early, but not for long. "No, Jamal said he'd be here again at 7. The words sounded less tentative than they had a day ago. Mia bounded around, excitement sparking in her eyes. "Yay! I hope he plays the farm songs on the radio again." Grace gave her daughter a lopsided smile. "We'll see, sweetheart." Deep down, she shared Mia's anticipation. She too had begun to trust that Jamal's car would pull up outside soon. Still, a small knot of anxiety lingered in her stomach, afraid that one day he might be too busy or too burdened by his other life. As if on cue, the hum of an engine drifted through the open window. Mia sprang to the door, and Grace, with a final glance at her reflection in the small wall mirror, followed. Sure enough, Jamal's sedan sat at the curb, just as polished and unhurried as before. He stepped out when he saw them, offering an easy wave. Mia rushed forward, and Grace approached more calmly, but with a slight smile that told him she was happy to see him too. "Morning," he greeted. "Ready for another day?" Grace nodded, ushering Mia into the back seat. "Thanks for doing this again." He shrugged in a laid-back way, though his voice carried sincerity. "I want to. Besides, mornings with Mia beat strategy meetings any day." Grace chuckled softly, then settled into the passenger side. The moment he pulled away from the curb, Mia launched into a story about how she planned to draw more dinosaur pictures at preschool, which made Jamal grin. Grace observed the two of them in the rearview mirror, Mia leaning forward in her seatbelt, Jamal glancing back to acknowledge her enthusiasm. Bit by bit, they were clicking into a natural rhythm. Soon, they arrived at Little Blossom's preschool. Mia hopped out, backpack in tow, and gave Jamal an exuberant high five before dashing inside. Grace lingered for a moment at the entrance, turning toward Jamal as Mia disappeared into the hallway. "I'm not working until 8, she said, fiddling with the strap of her purse. "I actually have a few minutes to spare." "Want to grab a coffee?" he offered, nodding toward a small cafe across the street. Grace hesitated. She had planned to head straight to the diner to prep, maybe have a moment alone. but the invitation felt warm, almost reminiscent of the night they'd first met when they shared easy conversation in her old workplace. "Sure," she replied, surprising herself. "That'd be nice." They strolled to the cafe, a place with rustic wooden tables and the smell of fresh pastries. It was busier than expected, with people grabbing lattes on their way to offices. Jamal, noticing Grace's quick scanning of the menu, quietly insisted on paying. She gave him a look of mild protest, but he was already handing over a bill. They found a small table near the window, coffee cups in hand. Grace wrapped her palms around the paper cup, letting the steam rise to her face. Jamal sipped carefully, then studied her. "So," he began, treading cautiously into more personal territory, "I know we haven't really talked about our own lives. Beyond Mia, I mean." She nodded, taking a sip. "That's true. We've kind of just been focusing on her." He swallowed. "I'd like to know more about you, and not just how you've handled things alone, but how you're doing now. How your days go, your plans, your dreams." Grace shifted, feeling her cheeks grow warm. "My dreams?" she echoed, a bit self-conscious. "I'm 30, Jamal. My dream is for Mia to be happy, for my rent to be paid, and to not drop a tray of glasses at the diner." He gave a soft laugh, but there was no mockery in it, only sympathy and a bit of regret. "I understand, but still there might be something else. Maybe a goal you have for yourself." She exhaled. "I used to think about going back to school, nursing or maybe a teaching certificate, but then things got complicated." She paused, eyes flicking to the cafe's decorations. "When I found out I was pregnant, I had to work full-time, and after Mia was born, it was just not possible financially. One day, maybe." Jamal's heart sank. He pictured the lavish bonuses he'd earned, the expensive dinners he'd taken clients to. Meanwhile, Grace had been juggling shifts and motherhood, burying personal goals under survival. "That one day doesn't have to be so far away," he said gently. "If you want to take classes, I could help." Her gaze snapped to him, wary. "You mean pay for it?" "Well, yeah, if that's what it takes." He shrugged, trying to appear casual. "I can't change the past, but maybe I can support you now." For a moment she was silent, wrestling with the uneasy notion of accepting financial help. Her pride warred with the relief of possibly affording an education. "I don't want you to think you can just fix everything with money." "I know," he said quickly. "I know that's not how it works. But I have resources, and you shouldn't be sacrificing your future. You've already given up so much. Let me be here for you, the way I should have from the start." Grace stared down at her coffee lid, tracing its rim with her thumb. She remembered the nights of exhaustion, the sense of being trapped in the same cycle. His offer felt immense, a hand reaching out to lift her onto stable ground. But fear and doubt clenched her heart. What if he changed his mind? What if there were strings attached? For now, she took a careful middle ground. "Let's just keep things in the air, focus on Mia, and if the time feels right, maybe I'll look into some classes." Jamal nodded, sensing the delicate balance. "Okay," he said softly, not pushing further. "Whenever you're ready, Grace." They fell into a more comfortable silence, sipping coffee. The bustle of the cafe around them formed a cocoon of anonymity, though a few passers-by gave Jamal a double take. He was a known figure in local business circles. Grace noticed but didn't comment. She suspected that, in his world, people recognized him often, and it dawned on her that stepping into Jamal's domain publicly would be a whole new level of exposure. When their cups were nearly empty, she glanced at the clock on her phone. "I should head to the diner. Thank you for the coffee. And for picking Mia up later, again." He stood with her, tossing the coffee cup in the nearest bin. "Of course. Text me if anything changes." They walked back to where they had parked. Jamal's sedan gleamed in the rising sunlight, a symbol of his corporate success. Grace paused at the sidewalk. It felt oddly like a moment of parting ways that mirrored a deeper choice, whether to embrace each other's lives or keep them separate. Jamal lifted a hand in a small wave, then seemed to rethink it, leaning in to press a light, barely there kiss on her cheek. The gesture stunned her, but she found herself not pulling away. Instead, her eyes closed for a microsecond as warmth flitted through her. "Have a good day," he whispered. She swallowed and nodded. "You too." Then he was gone, stepping into the driver's seat and pulling into traffic. Grace watched him merge onto the main road, her heart thumping from that brief, intimate contact. The diner greeted her with clattering plates and the hum of a chatty breakfast crowd. April, one of her co-workers, shot her a curious glance as she clocked in. "You're almost late, Grace. Everything okay?" Grace mustered a tight-lipped smile. "I'm fine. Just took an extra moment this morning." April's eyes narrowed with a teasing edge. "An extra moment, huh? That wouldn't have anything to do with a certain tall, good-looking man who's been dropping you off, would it?" Heat crept up Grace's neck. "You've seen him?" April shrugged, smirking. "A couple times, yeah. Hard to miss that car in this neighborhood. Who is he? A friend?" For a heartbeat, Grace contemplated lying or downplaying it. But something in her said it was time to own the situation. "He's Mia's father," she said simply, bracing for April's reaction. April's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I didn't realize—" Grace sighed, placing her apron around her waist. "We have a long history. He just came back into our lives recently, trying to figure it all out." April's smirk softened into genuine curiosity. "Well, good luck, hun. If he's stepping up for Mia, that's good news, right?" Grace nodded, a flicker of a smile. "Yeah, it is. Just complicated." And with that, she turned to the day's work, taking orders, pouring coffee, darting between tables. Yet, through the clang of dishes and the swirl of patrons, her mind kept wandering to Jamal. How he'd offered to help her return to school. That small, almost hesitant kiss on the cheek. The promise that he'd pick Mia up again this afternoon. By midday, the lunch rush swelled. Grace jotted orders, her handwriting barely legible in her haste. Despite the chaos, she felt an undercurrent of energy, like the world wasn't so heavy on her shoulders anymore. No bus ride for Mia, no last-minute babysitter scramble. It was a subtle but powerful shift. Just as the clock inched toward 3, Grace had a moment to breathe. She sneaked a peek at her phone. No new messages from Jamal. No news was presumably good news. In her mind, she pictured him strolling into Little Blossoms, signing Mia out, maybe swinging by the park again. A pang of longing blossomed. She wanted to see them together, to confirm that this wasn't some passing dream, that Jamal truly was weaving himself into their daily life. Yet she reminded herself to tread gently. A few days of effort didn't erase years of absence. At 4:30, the diner calmed enough for her boss to let her clock out early. She hurriedly shed her apron, grabbed her bag, and set off for home. The bus ride felt long, but her chest fluttered with anticipation. Would she find Mia and Jamal waiting inside, painting pictures at the small kitchen table? Or would he have simply dropped her off, rushing away to his evening business? Minutes later, she climbed the rickety stairs to her apartment and fumbled with her key. Opening the door, she was greeted by warm laughter. Mia was perched on a chair at the kitchen counter, and Jamal, dress shirt sleeves rolled up, was helping her carefully measure flour and sugar. The smell of baking wafted over Grace, startling her. "Mommy!" Mia squealed. "We're making cookies for you!" Grace blinked, stepping inside and shutting the door. "Cookies?" She couldn't help but smile at the slight mess. Flour smudged on the counter, sugar crystals scattered. Mia's cheeks were dusted with white, and Jamal's usually impeccable shirt had a faint streak of batter down the front. Jamal looked sheepish. "I didn't realize how much the recipe would require, but Mia insisted on surprising you. Hope that's okay." Grace's eyes glowed. "It's more than okay," she murmured. Then, unable to resist, she moved closer to peek at the mixing bowl. The dough looked workable, albeit sticky. "You can help us finish," Mia exclaimed, attempting to climb down from the chair but nearly sending the measuring cup flying. Jamal steadied her just in time. Grace set her purse down, still in a mild state of amazement. She thought of how these domestic moments, father and daughter baking cookies, were the sort of memories she never imagined Mia would have. And here they were, as ordinary and extraordinary as could be. In a few swift motions, she slid off her coat and joined them. Under Grace's guidance, they rolled small balls of dough onto a baking tray, Mia giggling each time she squished the dough. Jamal put the tray in the oven, and together they waited, Mia hopping with excitement at every minute that ticked by. When the timer beeped, Jamal retrieved the tray, and a sweet aroma filled the apartment. Mia practically danced in place. "That smells so yummy! Mommy, taste first!" Grace laughed, taking a cookie from the tray carefully. It was still hot, so she blew on it before breaking off a piece. The taste of warm sweetness made her hum with appreciation. "Delicious," she announced, giving them both a thumbs up. Mia took one next, munching happily. Then Jamal tried a bite, looking self-conscious but proud as Mia rewarded him with an enthusiastic grin. "Your dad's a pretty good baker, huh?" Grace teased, only half joking. Mia nodded in exaggerated agreement, crumbs on her chin. "Yes, he stirs really fast." Jamal laughed, ruffling Mia's hair. In that instant, Grace felt a pang deep in her chest, an odd blend of gratitude and wistfulness. This was what she had longed for, the simple wholeness of a family evening, the warmth of closeness. The conversation turned to Mia's day at preschool, then drifted to Jamal's office news. He kept it child-friendly, avoiding mention of boardroom pressure. Grace observed Mia's fascination with Jamal's grown-up job, amused by how she imagined it meant wearing fancy clothes and telling people what to do. Jamal, grinning sheepishly, assured Mia it wasn't that glamorous. When the cookie feast wound down, Mia let out a content sigh. "Mommy, can I watch a cartoon before bed?" Grace nodded. "Just one," she reminded. "Go wash your hands first. You're all sticky." As Mia dashed off to the bathroom, Grace collected the cookie tray and plates, bringing them to the tiny sink. Jamal moved to help, but she waved him off gently. "Sit. You've done enough today." Still, he lingered near, leaning on the counter. "I enjoyed this, you know," he said softly. "I never had family moments like these growing up. Dad was too busy even to think about baking cookies." Grace switched off the tap, drying her hands. "It's amazing how little things can mean so much, right?" He nodded, eyes drifting to the short hallway where Mia disappeared. "I'm realizing that every single day now." She turned to face him fully. "Thank you for not just picking her up, but for making the afternoon special. Mia's never been this excited about baking." Jamal lifted one shoulder in a quiet shrug. "I just followed her lead. She saw a baking show on TV and asked if we could try it. It's nothing. It's not nothing." Grace's gaze locked with his. "It's a lot." They stood there in a gentle silence, aware of the closeness. The sound of cartoon jingles reached them from the living room, Mia settling onto the couch for her pre-bed show. Grace glanced at Jamal's shirt, noticing again the smear of cookie dough. With a small laugh, she used a damp cloth to dab at it. "You might want to bring an apron next time." He chuckled, letting her fuss over his shirt. Duly noted. Her hands stilled, cloth pressed against the fabric. She caught herself lingering too long, meeting his eyes again. The air thickened with a connection she had almost forgotten, one that hovered on the cusp of something more. But Mia's voice abruptly called, "Mommy, I'm done washing my hands." The moment dissolved, and Grace cleared her throat, stepping back. "Bedtime will come soon," she murmured. "We have a quick bedtime routine, brush teeth, pick out clothes for tomorrow, read a story. You're welcome to—" She paused. This time she didn't assume. She asked, "Would you like to stay for that?" Jamal's expression softened, relief clear in his eyes. "I would love to." And so, another evening found them side by side, guiding Mia through bedtime. Tonight, Grace read a princess story while Jamal occasionally supplied sound effects. Mia giggled at the silly voices, curled up under her blanket. When the final page turned, her eyelids drooped. One by one, they tiptoed out of her room, leaving the soft glow of a nightlight to guard her dreams. In the living room, the air felt charged with questions. Should Jamal stay longer? Should Grace invite him to talk more? Yet a subtle fatigue lay beneath their interactions. Both had put in a day's work, both were still navigating emotional transitions. In the end, Grace thanked him for his time, and he gathered his briefcase he'd left in the corner. At the door, their goodnight felt heavier than before, as though they were each aware of the delicate bond forming and how easily it could break. Before stepping into the hall, Jamal leaned in. "Tomorrow," he said softly. "I'll see you both." Grace nodded. "Yes, tomorrow." The door closed, leaving her alone in the quiet apartment. She pressed her back against the wall, staring at the pictures Mia had drawn. Crayon renditions of 3 figures: a little girl, a mother, a father. Mia had drawn them all holding hands. That new drawing hung on the fridge like a statement of hope. Exhaling, Grace closed her eyes. The future loomed uncertain, filled with the complexities of Jamal's corporate world and her desire to protect Mia's heart. But for the first time in a long while, she dared to believe they could find a path forward. One cookie-baking afternoon at a time, they might just become the family they'd never thought possible. Sunlight peeked through the curtains of Jamal's penthouse bedroom, rousing him earlier than usual. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The space was as pristine and elegant as always. Expensive linens, modern artwork, a silent air conditioner humming gently. Yet over the last few days, he'd found himself missing the quieter bustle of Grace's modest apartment, the simple laughter of Mia, and the unexpectedly easy warmth that filled those small rooms. He rose, slipping into a pair of neatly pressed pants and a crisp dress shirt. Another day awaited, one that would involve balancing morning fatherhood duties with the unstoppable demands of corporate life. But if the last several days had taught him anything, it was that such a balance, though new, wasn't impossible. In fact, it was fast becoming the best part of his routine. Walking into the living area, he passed a panoramic window that offered a sweeping view of the city. For once, he didn't pause to admire it. Instead, his eyes landed on a small, brand-new photo frame resting on a side table. Inside it was a snapshot he'd taken with his phone the day before. Mia clutching the bouquet of flowers she'd picked out for Grace, big grin plastered on her face, Jamal's own hand resting gently on her shoulder. He hadn't known how it would feel to see a tangible record of fatherhood, but the flutter in his chest was unmistakable. He felt proud, protective, and oddly tender. His phone chimed with a reminder for an 8:30 a.m. virtual meeting, business as usual. Still, he had a stop to make first, picking Grace and Mia up for Mia's preschool drop-off. It was a routine that had begun so naturally over these last days, as though making up for lost years. He'd gleaned from Grace's quiet smiles and Mia's excited chatter that these small gestures mattered more than grand gestures ever could. By 6:58 a.m., Jamal was already parked outside Grace's building. The morning light cast the rundown exterior in a gentler glow. He checked his watch and then glanced up, waiting. A few minutes later, the door opened and mother and daughter emerged. Mia bounded ahead, bright-eyed. Grace followed, wearing her maroon diner uniform under a light jacket, hair pulled into a neat ponytail. "Morning," Jamal called through the open window. Mia hopped in eagerly, greeting him like a lifelong friend. Grace slipped into the front seat, smiling in a way that hinted at how quickly these rides had become a new normal. Mia fidgeted with the radio as they pulled away from the curb. "Let's listen to something fun," she declared, scanning through channels. Grace gave a playful eye roll, but Jamal merely grinned and let Mia pick. Soon, peppy tunes filled the car and the drive to Little Blossoms became a cozy routine. Mia singing along, Grace occasionally joining in with an off-key hum, and Jamal soaking it all in. When they reached the preschool, Mia unclipped her seatbelt. "Mommy, you have an early shift, right?" Grace nodded. "Yep, I do, so I'll see you after school, sweetheart." She leaned back to give Mia's hand a quick squeeze. "Behave, okay?" Mia nodded. Then she turned to Jamal. "Are you picking me up again?" Jamal glanced at Grace. She'd already given him permission over text last night, but he waited for her confirmation. She offered a slight nod. "Yes, he is," Grace told Mia, "so give him a big smile when you see him this afternoon." "Yay!" Mia chimed, throwing her arms up in a gesture of triumph. She hopped out, waving goodbye. Grace and Jamal watched her skip toward the entrance. Together, they breathed a simultaneous sigh, part warmth, part caution. They were forging new patterns, yet each day brought them deeper into uncharted territory. Grace turned to Jamal. "Thanks again. It really makes a difference having you there for her. And for me," she said softly. His eyes flicked with sincerity. "I'm glad to do it." They lapsed into a hesitant silence. So many unspoken questions, so many shifting boundaries. Finally, Grace cleared her throat. "I need to get to the diner soon. The managers asked me to cover an extra hour. One of the other waitresses is out sick." "No problem," Jamal replied. "I have a meeting at 8:30. I can drop you off on the way." She hesitated. The fact that he was adjusting his schedule to accommodate them both was still a new concept. She was used to scrounging for bus schedules, racing the clock. Now, Jamal's calm willingness rearranged her day in ways she didn't know how to articulate. "All right," she said with a grateful smile. The drive to the diner was short, filled with the mundane details of daily life. Grace telling him about some new menu item that was launching, Jamal mentioning how the stock markets were doing. Their conversation felt oddly domestic. Grace laughed lightly at one point. "We sound like an old married couple," she teased in an almost shy tone, then blushed immediately. I didn't mean it like—" Jamal let out a low chuckle, though something in his gaze shimmered. "I know what you mean." He turned the wheel, pulling up to the curb near the diner's chipped neon sign. "We'll see how Mia does with me picking her up today. Maybe we can do dinner together later?" His voice was careful, as though he expected hesitation. Grace gathered her purse. "Yes, that'd be nice. I'm done around 4, maybe 4:30. Text me and we can figure out something." "Sounds good," he said, feeling a quiet rush of relief that she hadn't shut the idea down. "Have a good shift, Grace." She exited the car, stepping onto the sidewalk. He watched as she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, glancing at him once more through the open window. "You too, Jamal. Good luck with your meeting." He nodded, gave a small wave, and eased the car into traffic. As he drove toward his modern office tower, a swirl of warm anticipation filled his chest. Dinner with Grace and Mia, an ordinary concept for some families, yet so profoundly new for him. Inside the polished lobby of the Douglas Corporation headquarters, Jamal's presence immediately commanded the usual respect. Receptionists smiled nervously, security guards nodded in greeting, and a few young interns straightened up, attempting to impress. Jamal felt the energy shift around him, as it always did. He was the CEO, after all, the man with the final say on multi-million-dollar decisions. But as he rode the private elevator to the top floor, his phone buzzed with a reminder. 8:30 a.m. Board call. The panel was waiting, ready to discuss expansions, quarterly earnings, and new proposals. For once, though, the weight of these matters didn't fully consume him. Another thought pressed quietly in the back of his mind. Mia would be out of school at 3, and he wanted to be there right on time. The conference room greeted him with the crisp scent of fresh coffee and the faint hum of the air conditioning. A row of sophisticated teleconference screens lit the wall, each connecting to an investor or board member from across the globe. Jamal took his seat at the head of the table, adjusting his tie out of habit. His CFO, a stern-faced woman named Camille, launched into financial updates the instant the meeting started. Slides appeared on the screens, showing upward trends in shipping costs, overhead expansions, and forecasted profits for the new quarter. Typically, Jamal thrived on this data, dissecting each figure with a decisive intellect. Today, though, he found himself glancing at the clock on the wall, mentally mapping out the time. "Mr. Douglas, regarding the subsidiary in Westbridge, do we proceed with the new acquisition or hold off due to uncertain markets?" asked one of the board members, a silver-haired gentleman whose microphone crackled over the distance. Jamal cleared his throat, refocusing. "The Westbridge acquisition." He tapped a pen on the table, recalling the research. "Let's proceed with caution. I want a thorough compliance check. Any sign of instability, and we withdraw. But if the fundamentals hold, we can finalize. Keep me updated." The meeting continued in that vein, question after question, slide after slide. Jamal answered calmly, a practiced authority in his tone. Yet as the hour stretched on, he felt a subtle shift in himself, a sense that while the business demanded attention, it wasn't his only priority anymore. Finally, the discussion moved to a close. Camille shot him a knowing glance across the table, as if recognizing he wasn't as laser-focused as usual. Once the teleconference ended and the screens went dark, she approached him. "Everything okay, Mr. Douglas?" she asked, eyebrows arched. "You seemed a bit preoccupied." He hesitated, considering whether to confide in her. Camille had been a trusted ally for years, though he'd never mixed personal life with corporate, but times were changing. "I'm fine, Camille. Just juggling some new responsibilities outside of work. Nothing that impacts operations." Her expression shifted slightly, curiosity tempered by professional decorum. "Understood," she said. "Just let me know if you need support or if your schedule requires adjustment." He nodded, appreciating the gesture. "I will." She left, and Jamal found himself alone in the conference room. The digital clock read 11:47. He had a little over 3 hours to handle more tasks before picking up Mia. A small smile tugged at his lips. Let no one say he couldn't handle fatherhood and corporate leadership. He'd simply do both. At 2:45 p.m., Jamal wrapped up an impromptu call with an anxious client. Stepping away from his desk, he grabbed his suit jacket and headed for the elevator. His assistant, a sharp-eyed man named Parker, trailed after him. "Sir, there's a client dinner at 6. They're expecting you at the Grand Meridian. I'll check if I can move it or attend briefly," Jamal interrupted, pressing the elevator button. "I'm not sure yet." "But, sir—" The elevator doors opened. Jamal sighed. "Look, Parker, contact them. See if the dinner can be pushed to 7:30 or so. I have personal commitments." He stepped in, letting the doors slide shut on Parker's slightly baffled expression. As the elevator glided down, Jamal exhaled. He'd rarely, if ever, rearranged major client dinners. But in the last week, he'd discovered something more precious than closing deals at lightning speed: being there for Mia. He refused to let a client dinner overshadow that. Minutes later, he was back in his car, weaving through afternoon traffic with practiced efficiency. Pulling up to Little Blossoms just as parents arrived in clusters of minivans and sedans, he felt a faint twinge of nervousness. No matter how many times he did this, a part of him marveled that he now had a daughter to pick up. He checked in at the reception desk, a process made faster by the staff's growing familiarity with him, and walked toward Ms. Linda's classroom. Through the windowed door, he spotted Mia sitting on a small rug with a couple of other kids, all engrossed in a story Ms. Linda was reading. When Ms. Linda noticed him, she concluded the story and motioned for Mia. The little girl lit up at the sight of him, bounding over with her backpack. Jamal's chest tightened again at her unabashed excitement. He signed her out, exchanging quick pleasantries with Ms. Linda, who seemed quietly pleased to see Mia's father so consistently present. "How was your day?" he asked as they walked outside. "Fun. We painted animals," Mia chirped, rummaging in her backpack. She pulled out a piece of slightly crumpled paper covered in colorful streaks. "Look, I made a giraffe for Mommy. She likes giraffes, right?" Jamal glanced at the painting, an abstract, bright shape with a tall neck. He grinned. "She's going to love it." They headed to the car, Mia settling into the back seat. She chattered about her friends, about a puzzle she'd finished, and about the snack Ms. Linda gave them. Jamal listened intently, chiming in with questions. He was still learning the intricacies of preschool life: who got the gold star, who cried over spilled paint, who shared their crayons. Each detail felt like a precious peek into Mia's world. He drove toward Grace's apartment building but paused. They still had some time before Grace finished her shift. "Mia," he said thoughtfully, "want to do something before we head home? Maybe a quick stop at the park again, or—" "Mommy said we could have dinner all together," Mia interjected. "Can we go get stuff to make tacos? She likes tacos. Sometimes she can't buy all the ingredients, though, so she just makes beans and rice." Jamal's heart pinched at that small revelation. "Sure," he answered, mustering a smile. "Let's go to the grocery store. We can surprise her with everything we need for tacos." Mia whooped excitedly, bouncing in her seat. With that, Jamal turned the car toward a local market. They roamed the aisles, Mia pointing out tomatoes and onions, Jamal carefully picking out fresh lettuce. A sense of purposeful joy filled him. Growing up, he'd never associated grocery shopping with anything but mundane chores. Yet with Mia at his side, giggling as she reached for a mini cart, even the simplest tasks felt extraordinary. They left the store with bags of ingredients, and upon Mia's insistence, a small tub of ice cream for dessert. The whole endeavor took only half an hour, but by the time they approached Grace's building, the clock read nearly 4:30. Perfect timing. Grace should be finishing her shift soon. Back in the apartment, Mia helped him carry the groceries up the stairs. She proudly clutched her giraffe painting for Grace in her free hand. Once inside, the space was quiet, but the warmth of familiarity greeted them. Mia set the painting on the kitchen table and they began unpacking groceries. Jamal tried to figure out the best place for each item, uncertain where Grace kept everything. Mia guided him, opening cupboards and the small fridge. Just as they finished, footsteps sounded on the landing outside. A moment later, keys jingled and the door opened. Grace stood there, eyes flicking from the groceries on the counter to Mia's excited grin. Then she noticed Jamal, sleeves already rolled up as though preparing to cook. "Hey," she said, the day's fatigue easing into a soft smile. "You two have been busy." Mia ran up, thrusting the painted giraffe forward. "Mommy, for you! We made a taco surprise!" Grace's face illuminated as she took the painting. "Oh, Mia, this is gorgeous," she murmured, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. Her gaze shifted to Jamal, and emotion flickered across her features. "You really didn't have to do all this." He shrugged lightly, though his voice was gentle. "Mia said tacos are your favorite. We wanted to have everything ready. I'm no chef, but I can at least chop veggies." Grace glanced at the bags, the fresh produce, and the sparkle in Mia's eyes. A swirl of gratitude washed over her. She set her bag down, crossing the room to rest a hand on Jamal's arm. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's been ages since I had the chance to make tacos with all the fixings. This is really thoughtful." Jamal let out a small exhale, relieved. "I'm glad you think so. If you want, we can do it together, since, you're the expert." He added a playful grin, remembering their earlier cookie adventure. Grace grinned back. "Sure," she said. Then her stomach rumbled softly and she laughed. "Guess I'm hungry too. Let's make dinner." Together they set about preparing the meal. Grace took charge of seasoning the ground meat and simmering it on the stove, while Jamal chopped tomatoes, lettuce, and onions at the counter. Mia darted between them, rummaging for plates, occasionally sneaking bites of cheese. The apartment filled with the savory scent of sizzling spices, the whir of a small fan, and the staccato of happy conversation. Grace asked about Jamal's day, and he mentioned the board meeting, though he steered clear of the corporate complexities. She listened with polite interest, more focused on how he looked more relaxed than stressed. By the time they wrapped up cooking, tortillas were warmed, fixings were set out in mismatched bowls, and Mia was practically dancing with impatience. Gathered around the small table, they assembled tacos with laughter, Grace cautioning Mia not to overload hers with salsa. Mia giggled, determined to do it herself. Jamal demonstrated the technique of folding without spilling, gleaned from some half-remembered cooking show. When all was ready, Grace lifted her taco for a toast of sorts. To a new kind of dinner time," she said quietly, glancing at Jamal. "And to being together." Jamal, caught off guard, felt a rush of emotion. He clinked his taco gently against hers, an improvised gesture that made Mia burst into giggles. For him, it felt symbolic, a bridging of worlds, an acceptance of the father he was becoming. They dug in, exclaiming over flavors. Mia got a bit of salsa on her chin. Grace teased Jamal about his not-so-tidy folding. Light-hearted banter rose. By the time the plates were nearly clean, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges outside the window. After dinner, Mia helped them clear the table, proudly carrying small bowls to the sink. Jamal insisted on washing the dishes, letting Grace finally rest. She watched him from the side, arms folded over her chest, a grateful half-smile curving her lips. "Thank you," she repeated, voice low. "Not just for dinner, for making an effort every day." He glanced at her, water streaming over plates. "I told you I'd do my best to be part of Mia's life, and yours," he said. "I'm glad you're letting me." She gave a slight nod, stepping closer. "I still worry that it's all too fast, but seeing Mia this happy, it feels right." Jamal shut off the tap, drying his hands on a dish towel. "We'll keep taking it slow, one day at a time," he murmured. "Whatever pace you need." Just then, Mia poked her head into the kitchen. "Mommy, can Jamal do bedtime story again?" she asked, hugging a plush bunny to her chest. Grace snuck Jamal a tender look. "Sure, if he wants to." Jamal's chest warmed. "Of course I want to," he answered, stepping over to Mia. She grabbed his hand, towing him excitedly to the bedroom. Grace trailed behind them, flicking off the lights in the kitchen and living room. Inside Mia's small, cozy room, they settled onto the bed. Mia picked a new storybook, something about a brave little cat traveling through space. Jamal read aloud, giving each character a distinct voice, while Grace listened from the foot of the bed, half lost in thought at how different her life felt from just a week ago. When the tale ended, Mia fought drowsiness, but her eyelids soon drifted shut. Jamal carefully placed the book aside, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders. Together, he and Grace tiptoed out, leaving only the soft glow of Mia's nightlight. In the living room, the hush deepened. Grace leaned against the wall, arms lightly crossed. Jamal lingered a couple of steps away, unsure if he should say goodnight or stay longer. The distance between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Finally, Grace spoke. "I've never seen Mia so content, so sure of things," she admitted. "In a way, it scares me, because if something goes wrong, if you—" She trailed off, eyes flicking downward. He stepped forward. "I understand, but I'm not going anywhere, Grace." Her gaze rose to meet his, vulnerability shining in it. I want to believe that. I do. He swallowed, bridging another step. They were close now, close enough to feel each other's warmth in the dimly lit apartment. I know it'll take time for me to prove it, he said gently. I'm here for Mia, and for you too. You're not alone anymore. A breath escaped Grace's lips, trembling slightly. She raised a hand, almost in a gesture of hesitation, then let it drop again. Her next words were barely above a whisper. Thank you. A current of shared longing filled the gap between them. Jamal realized with a slight jolt that the same bond pulling him closer to Mia was also drawing him toward Grace. The memory of that single kiss on her cheek the other morning, so brief, lingered like an invitation. For a moment he hovered, heart pounding. But something about the tenderness in Grace's eyes told him not to rush. Instead, he gently reached out, took her hand in his. She didn't pull away. That alone felt like a significant step. Good night, he said softly. She squeezed his hand, exhaling a mixture of relief and anticipation. Good night, Jamal. See you tomorrow. He nodded, releasing her fingers slowly before turning to the door. Each time he left, it got harder to let go, but he also understood the fragile nature of rebuilding what they'd never fully started. With one final look at Grace's face, tired but glowing with a private hope, he stepped into the hallway, heart buoyed by a sense of belonging he'd never found in any boardroom or penthouse suite. As the door clicked shut, Grace drew a shaky breath. Life was different now. Each day brought new moments of closeness, new reminders that letting Jamal in might be the best decision she'd made in years. But the voice of caution still whispered that good things could be fleeting, that heartbreak might lurk around the corner. Yet when she tiptoed to Mia's room and watched her sleeping soundly, the child's small hand clutching that plush bunny, Grace's resolve strengthened. One step at a time, she told herself, echoing Jamal's words. They were forging a path that, with enough care, might lead to the family Mia had already drawn with crayons on the fridge. And that vision, faint, hopeful, was enough to carry them forward through another dawn. Mornings settled into a steady pattern over the next 2 weeks, Jamal picking up Grace and Mia, dropping Mia off at Little Blossoms, then heading off to his corporate tower. Occasionally, Grace decided to take the bus if Jamal had an early meeting, but more often than not, they rode together, forging a routine that felt strangely like a family's normal day-to-day. Even Mia's teachers at school commented on how excited she was each morning. Her father's presence had become a highlight that lit up her expressions and stories. In the afternoons, Jamal would slip away from the office at precisely 2:45 p.m. to beat the traffic, ignoring any raised eyebrows from co-workers or board members. After all, he was still the CEO. If anyone could rearrange a meeting schedule, it was him. So far, that balancing act worked. He'd pick up Mia, sometimes taking her for a quick treat or to the park, and they'd greet Grace when her diner shift ended around 4 or 5. Dinner at Grace's small apartment had become a near-daily occurrence, whether a simple soup or leftover takeout, all culminating in bedtime stories for Mia, who insisted on calling him Daddy in a tone bursting with pride. Yet beneath the newfound warmth, both Grace and Jamal carried private undercurrents of apprehension. Grace's daily life was still a tightrope, juggling bills, diner shifts, and stolen moments of joy. Jamal tried to remain calm, but the perpetual hum of his phone and the swirl of corporate responsibilities hinted that his own world was never far from overshadowing this fragile peace. One Tuesday afternoon, as Jamal pulled up to the preschool, he checked his messages. There were 3 missed calls from Parker, his assistant, and a text from Camille, the CFO, marked urgent. Need your input on new investor inquiry. Possible crisis if we don't respond properly. Please call. Jamal grimaced, quickly typing a reply that he'd handle it soon. Then he shoved the phone into his pocket, determined to maintain the routine of picking Mia up without letting her see his stress. He stepped inside Little Blossoms, signing in with the friendly receptionist who recognized him instantly. Ms. Linda, tall and smiling, brought Mia out as usual, but her face carried a hint of concern today. She nodded politely to Jamal, then knelt to Mia's level. "Say bye to your friends," she reminded gently. Mia grinned, waving at a classmate. "Everything okay?" Jamal asked Ms. Linda once Mia scampered to get her backpack. Ms. Linda hesitated. "I just want to let you know, Mia's been wonderful. No problems. It's just, she's asked a few times if you and her mom can come to our Family Day event next week. She's excited, but she mentioned not wanting to invite too many people. She said something about big crowds making her nervous." Jamal's heart skipped, remembering that Grace had once said Mia got anxious in large gatherings. "Family Day? Sure, we can be there. Thank you for the heads up." Ms. Linda smiled. "We'll see you then." Mia bounded over, practically glowing. As they headed to the car, Jamal asked about Family Day, and she explained it was a small celebration. Parents, or guardians, came to watch the kids perform a little song, then share snacks. "But you have to come, okay? Don't have work that day," she pleaded, eyes big as saucers. He kneeled to her eye level in the parking lot, ignoring the faint buzz of traffic. "I'll be there," he promised, giving her a gentle fist bump that she returned with gusto. Inside, though, he felt the tug of worry. Which day was this event? Could he rearrange his schedule? He'd move heaven and earth if he had to. Once Mia was safely buckled in, Jamal checked his phone. Another text from Camille. The sense of corporate urgency loomed. With a silent vow to keep Mia's day free of stress, he started the car, smiling at her in the rearview mirror. "Let's see what your mom's up to. Maybe we can surprise her with dinner again." When they arrived at the diner, Grace was still mid-shift, weaving between tables with practiced ease. Jamal and Mia took a small booth, waiting quietly until Grace noticed them. She approached with a weary but genuine smile. "You two again?" she teased. "I'll be done soon but can't chat yet. I have to take these orders." Mia giggled, hugging her mother around the waist. Jamal nodded understandingly. "We'll wait. Take your time." Watching Grace work reminded Jamal of the night they'd first talked years ago in a nearly empty diner. He recalled how she'd listened patiently to his ambitions and frustrations, offering empathy he rarely received in his high-powered world. He'd left that night feeling oddly comforted, only to vanish from her life like a gust of wind. A pang of guilt threaded through him, but Mia's chatter about the day's activities quickly pulled his focus back. After a few more minutes, Grace signaled that she was heading for a break. She joined them, sliding into the booth next to Mia. "I have about 10 minutes, she murmured, letting out a relieved breath. "What's up? Everything okay?" Mia launched into an enthusiastic explanation about Family Day, detailing the group song they'd perform. Grace listened with interest, then turned to Jamal. "You'll be able to go?" He nodded, hand sliding around the phone in his pocket. "I'll make sure of it. Just tell me when." Grace softened. "Next Thursday at 3 p.m. She eyed him warily. "That's prime working hours for you. Are you sure?" "I'll clear my calendar," he said firmly, ignoring the flicker of doubt that tried to surface. Mia grinned, swinging her legs under the table. "I want to sing loud, but Ms. Linda says we have to be gentle or it'll hurt ears." Grace laughed. "Well, you do have a big voice sometimes." Jamal leaned in. "Then let's make sure we cheer for you quietly but excitedly, okay?" Mia nodded with a giggle. Grace's manager poked his head out from the kitchen, signaling her to wrap up. She sighed, standing from the booth. "Sorry. Gotta get back. Are we doing dinner at home tonight?" Jamal nodded. "If you'd like. I can handle Mia for a while, let you finish your shift, and then we can head out." She offered a grateful smile, brushing Mia's hair aside. "Sounds good. I'll be done in an hour or so." They parted ways, Mia waving at the diner staff. Jamal led her back to the car, phone buzzing again with corporate demands. Tension threatened to creep up his spine, but he focused on Mia. He refused to let urgent business overshadow the promise he'd made. They spent the next hour at a nearby bookstore, perusing colorful children's titles while Jamal half kept an eye on his phone. Mia squealed over a dinosaur pop-up book, and Jamal relented, buying it without hesitation. He checked the time, 5:15. Grace would be getting off any minute. Back at the diner, they found Grace already changed out of her uniform, waiting on the curb. She spotted Mia and Jamal through the windshield, her tired expression brightening. "Let's get going," she said, slipping into the front seat. She immediately spotted the bookstore bag. "What's that?" "A new dinosaur pop-up," Mia proclaimed from the back, hugging the bag. "Jamal said we could read it at bedtime." Grace shook her head with mock scolding. "Spoiling her already." But warmth flooded her eyes. Jamal shrugged, starting the engine. Just a small treat. Their drive home was filled with the usual chatter, but Jamal's phone vibrated every few minutes. He managed to ignore it until they pulled up to Grace's building. This time, it chimed loudly, and with a resigned look, he checked the screen. Camille had texted again, "Investor meltdown. We need a statement from you tonight. Call me ASAP." Jamal's jaw tightened. The sense of corporate crisis pressed in. He'd hoped to enjoy an evening of quiet normalcy again. Grace, noticing his frown, asked gently, "Work trouble?" He nodded, forcing a small smile. "Nothing I can't handle. Let's go upstairs. I might have to make a quick call, though." Inside the apartment, Mia dropped her backpack by the couch and plopped down, flipping through the new pop-up book. Grace leaned her head against Jamal's shoulder as he settled at the small kitchen table, phone in hand. "Go ahead," she whispered. "I can keep Mia occupied." He dialed Camille, stepping into the short hallway for some privacy. The line rang once before her steady voice answered, detailing how an investor had threatened to pull funding over rumored instability in the shipping sector. They needed Jamal's reassurance, a statement from him personally. Jamal pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let's draft a response," he said. "We'll confirm that the shipping expansions are based on accurate data. We can't lose them." Over the next 10 minutes, he hammered out bullet points with Camille, keeping his tone low so as not to alarm Grace or Mia. By the time he ended the call, he felt the old corporate stress kneading at his temples. Returning to the living room, he found Grace reading the pop-up book with Mia. The child was sprawled comfortably across Grace's lap, enthralled by cardboard dinosaurs. Spotting Jamal, Mia beckoned him over. "Come on, you have to see the T-Rex, it's huge." He mustered a grin, crossing the room to kneel by them. Grace studied his face, concern etched softly in her eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked under her breath. He nodded, though tension lingered in his shoulders. "Just a small crisis. I'll need to write up a statement. Maybe cut dinner short." Mia overheard, frowning. "You're leaving?" He hesitated. "Not right this minute, but I might have to soon." Disappointment clouded Mia's face, but she tried to smile bravely. Grace squeezed her shoulder. "He has an important job, honey. Sometimes things come up." "I know," Mia murmured, staring at the pop-up dinosaur. Jamal felt his heart twist. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised quickly, "and we'll read the rest of the book, okay?" Mia nodded, though her voice was subdued. "Okay, Daddy." In that moment, he realized how precarious this balance truly was. One phone call, one urgent client, and he risked letting Mia down. The sense of fatherly guilt was new to him, powerful enough to shake his usual composure. He forced a gentle smile, ruffling Mia's hair. "Let's at least start dinner together." They cooked a quick meal, spaghetti again, because it was simple enough to prepare quickly. But the usual laughter was laced with a subtle tension. Jamal's phone vibrated twice more, each time with updates from Camille. He managed to keep calm, but Grace sensed the strain. When the food was nearly ready, Jamal checked the time, 6:15. The client dinner he was supposed to reschedule had become moot in the face of this investor issue. He'd need to personally sign off on an urgent press statement. Another wave of guilt crashed over him. Grace took the pot off the stove, giving him a measured look. "If you have to go, just go," she said softly, no reproach in her voice. "It's all right." He opened his mouth to protest, but the phone buzzed again. Mia glanced up, brow furrowed with disappointment, but she remained quiet, too quiet for a child usually brimming with chatter. "Let's at least sit for a few minutes," Jamal tried, but the phone buzzed again in his hand. This time he recognized the investor's number. "Take it," Grace whispered. Sighing, he stepped away to answer, voice hushed. Mia stared at the half-prepared plates, a flicker of sadness crossing her face. Grace gently stroked her daughter's hair. "He'll be back soon," she tried to reassure, but she wasn't entirely sure if she believed it herself. Jamal returned after a minute, expression apologetic. "I'm sorry," he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. "I have to handle this now. They need me at the office for the official statement." Mia's shoulders slumped, but she mustered a small nod. "Okay." Grace offered him a nod of understanding too, though her eyes shimmered with concern. "Go then. We'll be all right. Just let me know how it goes." He leaned down to hug Mia, who clung to him tighter than usual. "I'll see you tomorrow, kiddo. We can finish the dinosaur book," he promised. She murmured something about T-Rex, her voice forlorn. Jamal stood, meeting Grace's gaze. Unspoken words passed between them. Regret, acceptance, a hint of worry about the path they were treading. And then he left, footsteps echoing down the corridor. For the first time in weeks, the soft click of the door shutting behind him felt less like a promise and more like a reminder that he was split between two worlds, and each demanded more than a casual commitment. Jamal drove through evening traffic, hands gripping the wheel. His mind warred with conflicting emotions, his unstoppable role as CEO pitted against the tender new bonds with Grace and Mia. Though he'd told them he wasn't going anywhere, the demands of corporate life had a way of pulling him away at the worst moments. His phone's navigation directed him downtown to the brightly lit headquarters. Stepping out into the underground parking, he felt a pang of longing for the simple dinner he'd left behind, with the child who now called him Daddy. But the tension in his chest hardened into resolve. He would handle the crisis quickly, do whatever was needed to steady the investor's nerves. Then he'd get back to Grace and Mia, reaffirm his commitment. He refused to let this slip away, not when he'd only just discovered what it meant to belong. Still, as he rode the elevator up, the heaviness of corporate duty pressed down. The face of the investor appeared on the teleconference screen, the same old cycle of crisis management beginning anew. Jamal steeled himself, diving into the negotiations with all his skill. Little did he know that this single emergency would spark a chain of events that tested the delicate balance he'd built, threatening to unravel the fragile new life he was weaving with Grace and Mia. And neither he nor Grace could foresee how swiftly the pressures of the past and the demands of a high-profile life would come knocking on their door. Late-night neon lit the city in vibrant streaks as Jamal steered his car through near-empty streets, the calm of pre-dawn hours at odds with the storm in his mind. It was well past midnight, and he'd spent the last several hours in frantic meetings, both virtual and face-to-face, fighting to keep the investor on board. Computers hummed and voices echoed in his head, each new question a weight on his shoulders. By the time the crisis was contained enough for him to leave, he felt wrung out, like he'd run a marathon on pure adrenaline. In the hush of the car, he replayed the dinner scene he'd abandoned at Grace's apartment. Mia's shining eyes when they started cooking, her quick look of disappointment when his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. He exhaled, a heavy sigh that fogged the windshield. This was exactly the scenario he'd feared, his corporate responsibilities ripping him away at inopportune times. He'd known it would be challenging to juggle fatherhood and the demands of a CEO's life, but knowledge did little to soften the reality. He parked outside his penthouse building, the valet nowhere to be seen at this hour. The tall glass doors gleamed under overhead lights, a lonely reflection of the city's emptiness. Inside, he bypassed the concierge with a polite nod, ignoring how the man eyed his tired face as though to ask, "Everything all right, sir?" Up in his penthouse, the silence felt oppressive. He let the door close behind him, setting his keys on a marble console table. The place was spotless, luxurious, and soulless compared to the messy warmth of Grace's apartment. He stared at the wide windows and the skyline beyond, but it all felt hollow. His phone vibrated once more. For a heartbeat, his heart leapt. Maybe Grace had messaged. But no, it was just a corporate email. Final attachments from Camille, summarizing the day's damage control. He typed a quick acknowledgement, then tossed the phone onto a nearby couch with more force than intended. A swirl of restlessness filled him. Though he was dog-tired, an urge to reach out to Grace thrummed beneath his weariness. Maybe he could call her, just to say good night, or, well, good morning. But checking the time, nearly 1:30 a.m., he knew she'd be sleeping, and he didn't want to disturb her, nor did he want to risk waking Mia. So he paced through the penthouse in the dark, haunted by the memory of Mia's disappointed face. He resolved to make it up to them both tomorrow, reschedule anything in his calendar, carve out the time. Yet a quiet dread nagged at him. This crisis might not be over. Others might surface. His position in the company, the face of so many deals, chained him to these responsibilities in a way he'd never truly resented until now. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him to bed, though sleep came fitfully. When he finally drifted off, it was with the silent vow to do better the next day. Morning arrived with a dull glow in the windows. Jamal awakened to his alarm at 6, a heavy ache behind his eyes. The bedsheets felt tangled, the memory of the night's restless tossing imprinted on them. Grimacing, he rubbed his face and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Another day, another chance, he reminded himself. He was out the door by 6:40, driving to Grace's place with an undercurrent of anxiety. Would Mia be upset? Would Grace be aloof or hurt? He dreaded seeing regret in her eyes. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd come to value the gentle acceptance he saw there each morning, how she'd greet him with a soft half-smile and a quiet, "Good morning." When he pulled up, the sidewalk was empty. No Grace, no Mia. Checking his watch, he realized it was 6:58, practically the same time he usually arrived, but they weren't waiting. A hint of worry gnawed at him. He stepped out of the car and approached the front door of the building. Just as he raised his hand to knock, the door squeaked open. Mia peeked out, backpack already slung on her shoulder. She wore a neutral expression, half sleepy, half uncertain. A moment later, Grace appeared behind her. "Morning," Jamal offered carefully. "Morning," Grace echoed, not unkindly but lacking the usual warmth. She ushered Mia forward. "All set, sweetie?" Mia nodded, slipping past Jamal toward the car. She didn't cling to him or squeal about radio songs. Instead, she muttered a subdued, "Hi, Daddy," and climbed into the back seat. Jamal's heart sank. He glanced at Grace, who gave him a faint shrug. "She's tired," she said in a quiet tone. "Up late reading that pop-up book. She's not mad at you, just disappointed." Her words stung more than if Mia had yelled at him. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I wanted to stay, but the crisis came up." Grace lowered her eyes. "I understand. Really, I do. But Mia's still learning how to handle that disappointment. Just do what you can to reassure her." He nodded, opening the passenger door for Grace. She slipped in, and he rounded to the driver's seat. The ride to the preschool was subdued, the radio off, Mia staring out the window at passing buildings. Jamal tried a few times to engage her, asking about her day, her upcoming family day practice, but her answers came in short murmurs. Grace watched it all with a compassionate but weary eye. When they pulled up to Little Blossoms, Mia popped the door open. Jamal turned to her, a gentle plea in his voice. "Mia, sweetie, I really am sorry about last night. It was an emergency at work." She looked at him, her expression more sad than angry. "Will you do it again tonight?" she asked. The question stung. "I hope not. I'll try not to," he said fervently. "I want to spend time with you. Always." She didn't answer, just gave a small nod and trudged to the preschool entrance. Grace's mouth tightened. "I'll talk to her," she said softly, gathering her things. "She'll be okay, Jamal. She just loves having you around. Last night was the first time we've seen you pulled away like that." He gripped the steering wheel, guilt thrumming in his chest. "I'll do better," he repeated. Grace reached over, gave his hand a quick squeeze. "I believe you." Then she slid out, heading into the building with Mia. Jamal sat there a moment, heart heavy. This was the cost of integrating his two worlds. Yet he wasn't giving up. He reversed out of the parking spot, determined to make amends that very evening. The hours at the office dragged. Another wave of calls poured in, clients rattled by the investors' near withdrawal, media outlets requesting statements. Camille and Parker fielded some of it, but everyone seemed to want Jamal's direct input. He fired off emails, hammered out quick internal memos, and recorded a reassuring video statement for the company's investor portal, speaking into the camera with measured calm. By mid-afternoon, a headache pulsed at his temples. Checking the clock on his screen, he noticed it was 2:20. Time to leave soon if he wanted to pick up Mia. Yet an urgent meeting had just been scheduled at 2:30, involving a high-stakes business partner from overseas. Jamal exhaled sharply. Could he risk missing that meeting? Possibly. But the partner was known for being temperamental, and if they lost his collaboration, the entire company's expansion project could stumble. The face of the brand, a voice inside him reminded. "You're the one they trust." He fired off a quick message to Camille. "I have to leave by 2:45 to pick up my daughter. Please keep the partner on the call if possible. I'll join from the car if needed." Camille replied almost instantly. "Understood. We'll stall him if we must. Just be ready to answer key questions. This is crucial." Jamal swallowed a groan but typed back an acknowledgement. That was that. He'd do the call remotely, on the road, so he could still get Mia at 3. At 2:30 sharp, he hurried into a conference room, laptop under his arm, and joined the video meeting. The overseas partner, a stern-faced executive in a crisp suit, immediately launched into a barrage of concerns. Currency fluctuations, shipping costs, competitor moves. Jamal responded with an authoritative calm, but his eyes kept darting to the digital clock at the corner of his screen. 2:40, 2:42, 2:44. He cleared his throat. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Tanaka, I'll need to transition to another line in just a moment. I'm prepared to continue talking, but I'll be traveling." Mr. Tanaka's expression tightened. "Traveling? This is urgent. Our timeline is critical." "I understand and I'm fully committed," Jamal said, gathering his things. "Let me shift to a mobile call. I won't miss a beat. Camille can continue on video for any documents we need to reference." The man didn't look thrilled, but he nodded grudgingly. Jamal ended the laptop connection and hurried from the conference room. Moments later, he was in the elevator, phone pressed to his ear, rejoining the conversation as best he could. His voice echoed in the steel enclosure. "Yes, Mr. Tanaka. We can confirm that data. Wait, Camille, can you share that chart?" He practically jogged to the parking garage, heart pounding not just from the tension of the meeting but from the precarious race against time, a flicker of memory. Mia's face this morning asking, "Will you do it again tonight?" No. He would not let her down. Not again. By 2:53 he was weaving through traffic, phone propped on a dash mount, video streaming from Camille's screen. "Yes, I see the chart. Let's proceed with that figure," Jamal said, mindful of the road as he tried to interpret small text. 2:59. He pulled up to the preschool, scanning the sidewalk. Mia was there, waiting with Ms. Linda, a small cluster of children still present. Ms. Linda had a polite but mildly concerned look. Mia clutched her backpack, her gaze flicking anxiously up and down the street. Jamal exhaled relief as he parked. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Tanaka," he said into the phone. "One moment, please." He muted the call, hopped out, and jogged over to Mia. "I'm here, sweetheart, right on time," he managed, giving a breathless grin. She looked up, eyes brightening with obvious relief. "Hi, Daddy." Ms. Linda gave him a small nod. "She was a bit worried. Glad you made it." "Me too," Jamal said fervently. "Thank you, Ms. Linda." He took Mia's hand, leading her to the car. She was calmer than in the morning, but still seemed slightly reserved, as if waiting to see if he'd be pulled away again. Once he opened the back door, though, she climbed in readily. Jamal jumped back into the driver's seat, unmuting the call, speaking in a measured tone. "Apologies, Mr. Tanaka. Let's continue. Right, so about the shipping routes." He glanced in the rearview mirror to see Mia listening intently, confusion on her face. She mouthed, "Work?" He nodded apologetically, continuing the conversation with Mr. Tanaka. The phone call lasted the entire drive. 15 tense minutes of negotiations. Mia sat quietly, hugging her backpack. Jamal hated subjecting her to a half-audible business argument, but cutting the call would risk losing the partnership. He pulled up to Grace's apartment just as Mr. Tanaka and Camille reached a consensus. "We'll finalize the contract language within the week," Jamal said. Yes, I'll confirm in writing." Then, with an almost muttered, "Thank you," he ended the call. Silence enveloped the car. Jamal turned to Mia, guilt etched in his eyes. "I'm sorry that took so long. Work stuff I couldn't avoid." Mia shrugged, a bit uncertain. "It's okay. You came for me on time." Jamal's chest eased. "Yes, and now we can spend time together." They headed upstairs, Mia's mood warming as they reached the door. She rang the bell excitedly, calling, "Mommy!" The door opened and Grace appeared, still in her diner uniform. She was just back from her shift, hair slightly disheveled, exhaustion on her face. But relief sparked in her eyes when she saw them both. "How'd it go today?" she asked, hugging Mia. "She was waiting right on time," Mia replied, glancing at Jamal with the first trace of a grin he'd seen since morning. Grace smiled at Jamal over Mia's head. "That's good to hear." He stepped inside, shoulders sagging with relief. "I had to finish a call on the way," he admitted. "But I made it." Grace studied him, a flicker of sympathy in her expression. "You look beat. Come sit." Mia pulled him toward the couch, rummaging for her crayons. She seemed to have rebounded from her earlier disappointment, though her gestures were still a bit tentative. Jamal felt a wave of gratitude for her resilient heart, and for Grace's acceptance of his chaotic schedule. A short while later, Grace ducked into the kitchenette to brew coffee for them both, leaving Mia and Jamal flipping through her new pop-up dinosaur book. He made a point to be extra animated, trying to chase away any residual gloom. Mia giggled, nodding eagerly when he roared in T-Rex imitation. Grace returned with steaming mugs, handing one to Jamal. "Rough day?" she asked softly, aware of the phone call's seriousness. He sipped gratefully, inhaling the warmth. "Very, but it's stabilized now. I'm sorry about last night." She patted his hand. "We managed. Mia was upset, but she understands it was important. She's a strong kid." Jamal nodded, voice low. "I just hate letting her down. Letting you down, too." Grace leaned against the couch, a thoughtful look on her face. "Life is complicated, especially with your job. I'm not naive to that. I just hope you keep finding ways to be present, even if it's not every single evening." He considered her words. "I will," he vowed. "I'm learning to push back in places I never did before, because you both matter more than any deal." She swallowed, a hint of emotion in her eyes. "Thank you." They let the silence linger, parted only by Mia's narration of a pterodactyl's flight. Jamal relaxed into the cushions, exhaustion loosening its grip as warmth replaced tension. Yes, the road ahead was riddled with potential pitfalls, but he was here, for now, with them. He reminded himself that soon there'd be family day at the preschool, a milestone he refused to miss. Even if the entire board threatened a revolt, he would stand by Mia's side. That singular resolve guided him through the evening, and for once no calls interrupted their dinner. Later, after Mia drifted off in the glow of her nightlight, Grace and Jamal sat briefly in the living room side by side. She rested her head on his shoulder, a cautious but deep trust. He reciprocated by sliding an arm around her waist, inhaling the gentle scent of her shampoo. The day's strains ebbed away in that moment, overshadowed by the quiet intimacy they'd built. Jamal closed his eyes, hearing only her steady breathing. For as long as this lull lasted, they both allowed themselves to believe it would hold, ignorant of the fact that in the next few days, old secrets and new complications would surface, testing the fragile family they fought so hard to form. Cool autumn winds began to roll through the city, swirling fallen leaves across sidewalks and bringing a refreshing chill to the air. It was the kind of weather that inspired people to sip hot drinks or cozy up inside. At least, that was what Grace thought as she stepped out of the diner one late afternoon. She pulled her cardigan tighter, imagining how Mia might be doing at preschool and whether Jamal had arrived to pick her up yet. Her shift had run over by half an hour, thanks to another co-worker calling in sick. By the time she'd peeled off her uniform and thrown on her casual clothes, the sky was already fading into a purple dusk. The text she'd received from Jamal still hovered in her mind. Picked Mia up. All good. See you at home. Simple words, but comforting, and a reminder that someone else was in this with her now. A smile tugged at her lips as she quickened her pace, dodging a cluster of teenage skateboarders near the bus stop. Only a few weeks ago she would have been rushing in a frenzy to pick up Mia by the preschool's closing time, apologizing profusely if she was even 2 minutes late. Today, Jamal had swooped in, balancing his calls and meetings. To anyone else, such an arrangement might seem ordinary, but for Grace it still felt like luxury, like relief. She hopped on the bus, letting the hum of the engine and the chatter of passengers fade into background noise. Her mind drifted to the upcoming family day at Little Blossoms. Mia had practiced her tiny songs relentlessly in front of the mirror, each time reminding Grace, "You have to come, Mommy, and Jamal too. Don't be late." Grace recalled how Jamal had vowed to clear his schedule for that afternoon. She prayed nothing would yank him away. The bus reached her stop. She hopped off, grocery bag in hand, and headed for her apartment building. She could see the warm glow of lights in her living room window, indicative that her place wasn't empty anymore. That image alone filled her with a soft sense of belonging. Inside, the familiar clink of dishes caught her attention. She turned the corner to the kitchenette and paused in surprise. Jamal, sleeves rolled up, was slicing tomatoes on the small counter while Mia scooped shredded cheese into a bowl. "Look who's here, Mommy," Mia announced, scurrying over to hug Grace around the waist. "We're making nachos tonight." Grace laughed, affection blooming in her chest. "Nachos, huh? That sounds fun." She met Jamal's gaze over Mia's shoulder. "I didn't expect you to cook again." He gave a half smile, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "We're just throwing stuff together. Figured we'd make a quick dinner before your bus got here." His eyes flicked to her grocery bag. "You didn't need to buy anything?" She shrugged. "Just a few essentials. Milk, eggs. I didn't know you'd have dinner handled." Even as she said it, gratitude threaded her tone. Not so long ago, she was the one managing every meal alone. Now she had help, and it was both exhilarating and slightly unsettling. Mia, oblivious to any undercurrent, tugged Grace's sleeve. "Can I show you the dance Ms. Linda taught us? It's for Family Day." Her face shone with excitement, and Grace nodded eagerly. Jamal set the knife down. "Go ahead, I can finish slicing," he said, gently gesturing toward the living room. With Mia leading, Grace followed her daughter to the open space by the couch. The child spun in a circle, humming a little tune and doing a cute hop-step routine. Grace clapped in delight. "That's adorable. You look like a pro." Mia beamed, hands on her hips. "Ms. Linda says we have to keep our lines straight. But sometimes Toby pushes me." She made a face. "But I push him back. Just a little." Grace lowered herself to Mia's level. "Maybe you can talk to Ms. Linda if Toby doesn't listen." "I will." Mia nodded, then skipped toward the kitchen again, presumably to check on the dinner progress. Grace lingered a second, smiling at how confident Mia had become since Jamal started coming around. She never openly said it to him, but she appreciated how gently he'd stepped into Mia's life. Still, a tiny bubble of worry floated in her chest. Jamal's job was demanding, and a single crisis had already pulled him away once. Family Day must be different, she told herself. She couldn't stand the idea of Mia standing on stage, scanning the room and not seeing the father she idolized now. Returning to the kitchenette, Grace found Jamal arranging layers of tortilla chips, cheese, and toppings on a baking sheet. Mia stood on a chair, carefully sprinkling diced tomatoes. Grace snuck up behind them, placing a hand lightly on Jamal's back. "Thank you," she said softly. He looked over his shoulder. "For what?" "For continuing to show up. For letting Mia be so excited about you. She's been counting the days to Family Day. She's thrilled you'll see her sing and dance." Jamal's eyes took on a warm gleam. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Good," Grace replied, relief in her tone. "Because it's tomorrow." He nodded. "Tomorrow 3 p.m. I have it blocked off on my calendar. I might have a meeting at 1, but I'll leave immediately after, no matter what." Grace gave his hand a quick squeeze, then moved aside so he could slip the nachos into their small oven. As the timer ticked, they chatted about Mia's day, Grace's shift at the diner, and the new demands popping up in Jamal's office. Even so, the conversation felt lighter tonight, like they'd settled into a routine where supporting each other's daily stresses came naturally. Soon the nachos emerged, golden and bubbly. Mia hopped down from the chair, squealing at the sight of melted cheese. They shared plates at the tiny table, crunchy bites accompanied by laughing commentary on Mia's classmate Toby, who apparently had an affinity for pushing everyone in line. After dinner, Mia announced she'd practice her Family Day song, "One More Time," which meant running through it thrice in the living room while Grace and Jamal applauded. Eventually, bedtime rolled around, and they coaxed her to brush her teeth, then read a quick story about space-traveling dinosaurs. Mia fell asleep with hardly a fuss, worn out by her own excitement. Grace and Jamal found themselves alone again, standing in the dimly lit living room. The hum of nighttime traffic filtered through the window. She offered him the couch, in case he wanted to stay longer. He hesitated, checking his phone for messages, a reflex he'd developed in the corporate trenches. Finding nothing urgent, he exhaled. "Looks like I'm free," he said with a slight grin, setting the phone aside. "I can stay for a bit." Grace managed a small warm smile, grabbing 2 mugs from the cupboard. "Coffee or tea?" "Tea, please," he replied. "I've had enough coffee to fuel an army." She filled the kettle, turning on the stove, then joined him on the couch. They settled side by side, an easy closeness that had grown over the weeks. His arm draped along the back of the couch, and she leaned comfortably into him. "She's so excited about tomorrow," Grace murmured. "That little dance, the song, it's all she's talked about." Jamal brushed a thumb across her shoulder, a thoughtful gesture. "I'm excited too. I've never been to a Family Day, or anything like it. I don't remember ever having that as a kid." His voice held a trace of regret. "My father was always too busy." Grace's hand found his, fingers lacing lightly. "Then tomorrow will be special, a new kind of memory." She paused, heart thrumming with hope. "And an important step. People will see us there. Your life is pretty private, but you're well known in business. Are you worried?" He considered her question. In truth, the notion of being recognized at a preschool event hadn't crossed his mind. "It's just a small preschool gathering," he said, giving a soft chuckle. "I doubt the press will burst in, but if anyone notices or snaps photos—" He shrugged. "Let them. I'm not ashamed, Grace. If anything, I'm proud to be Mia's father." Grace squeezed his hand. Those words steadied some of her hidden anxieties. She'd once feared that being tied to a powerful CEO would invite a barrage of prying eyes and judgment. His confidence, however, reassured her, for the moment. Their conversation was cut by the whistle of the kettle. She stood, retrieving 2 mugs of chamomile tea. When she returned, he took his gratefully, inhaling the calming scent. They drank in companionable silence, letting the lull of the day's end wrap them in tranquility. Eventually, Grace glanced at the time, nearing 10 p.m. "You should probably get rest," she suggested softly. "You've got a big day tomorrow, too." Jamal nodded, setting his empty mug on the coffee table. "You're right." Still, he hesitated to leave. Something about the warmth in this small apartment, Mia asleep in the next room, Grace beside him, felt more like home than his penthouse. But he had to be up early for a brief meeting before the afternoon event. She walked him to the door, where they lingered in a hush. His gaze flicked to her lips, to the small space between them. She tilted her head, not moving away. The tension that had been gently building over the past weeks stirred into the open. Slowly, he leaned in, capturing her lips in a gentle kiss. She inhaled sharply in surprise, then pressed closer, letting her eyes slip shut. The moment was sweet, tentative, and somehow inevitable. Neither spoke when they finally broke apart. Their eyes conveyed relief, longing, maybe even gratitude. It felt like an acknowledgement of the bond they were forging rather than just an impulse. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Good night," he murmured, voice husky. Her cheeks flushed, a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Good night, Jamal." He left then, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Grace closed the door, heart fluttering, mind buzzing with 1,000 hopes and a few fears. Yes, they were moving steadily into something deeper, but at least for now, it felt right. When Grace tiptoed into Mia's room, she found her daughter fast asleep, clutching a small plush dinosaur. Family Day was mere hours away, and Mia's faith in having both parents there buoyed her dreams. For Grace, the brief kiss at the door lingered like a promise, one she prayed the world wouldn't shatter. Morning came bright and brisk. Jamal waded through a short 8 a.m. executive call, then excused himself. No crises today, he'd decided. By noon, he was wrapping up emails, ignoring any new requests that weren't urgent. At 1 p.m., he slipped out of the office before anyone could stop him. He drove to Grace's apartment, feeling a giddy sense of anticipation. They planned to meet there so Mia could see them arrive together at Little Blossoms. Grace was already home, wearing a casual yet neat blouse and jeans, something comfortable for watching preschool performances. Mia was practically bouncing off the walls, a bow in her hair and sparkly sneakers on her feet. Jamal grinned. "Looking fancy, Mia. You ready to wow everyone?" She giggled, spinning in a circle. "Yes! Don't forget to clap loud, okay?" He crouched down, ruffling her hair lightly. "Absolutely. But remember, Ms. Linda said we can't scare Toby," he teased, referencing Mia's pushy classmate. Mia nodded solemnly. "Right, gentle claps." She then grabbed both parents' hands, towing them to the door. "Come on, we don't want to be late." Grace and Jamal exchanged an amused look, their hands momentarily linked through Mia's. In that shared glance, they silently acknowledged how much had changed, and how important this moment was. They descended the stairs and bundled into Jamal's car, with Mia chatting at top speed about everything Ms. Linda had prepared. When they arrived at Little Blossoms, the parking lot was fuller than usual, parents and children bustling in. paper streamers adorned the front door, and bright posters reading "Family Day" covered the windows. Mia dashed ahead, then stopped to wait, gripping their hands anxiously. Inside the hallway, they spotted some familiar faces, other parents, a few staff members, and Mia's classmates gathered in the large multi-purpose room. There was a small raised platform where a cluster of tiny chairs sat, likely for the children's performance. Ms. Linda waved them over. Mia ran to join her class, while Grace and Jamal found seats in the row of chairs designated for parents. The clamor of cheerful conversation filled the space. Grace spotted Ms. Linda gently corralling the children into a neat line. Jamal felt a surge of pride, seeing Mia's bright expression. She periodically glanced their way, checking that they were truly there. Grace leaned close, whispering, "Thank you for making time. It means so much." He covered her hand with his, offering a small squeeze. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he murmured. The program started, Ms. Linda welcoming everyone, followed by a simple introduction. The kids had prepared a song and a short dance, plus some drawings to showcase. Mia's eyes shone under the fluorescent lights. As the music began, she and her classmates swayed in unison, a little off-sync, but absolutely adorable. Grace and Jamal exchanged grins, hearts brimming with fondness. When the song ended, the children spread out, each proudly showing off a drawing they'd made of their family. Mia held up a crayon picture featuring herself, Grace, and Jamal, all holding hands in front of a house. A sun beamed overhead with a smiley face. She wiggled it in their direction as if to say, "Look." Jamal felt his throat tighten. Grace blinked back tears, recalling that first time Mia drew their family. Now here they were, publicly. With a surge of emotion, Jamal raised both hands in a proud clap, without scaring Toby, of course. They moved into a mingling period afterward, with tables of snacks and juice boxes. Mia zipped between her parents and friends, proudly introducing "my daddy" to a few classmates who wanted to see if he was really a big businessman. Jamal, feeling slightly bashful under the kids' scrutiny, answered their random questions with patience and humor. Grace stood back for a moment, watching Jamal talk to a group of 4-year-olds, answering queries about numbers on the computer and "Why do people call you Mr. Douglas?" He had never looked more human, more warm. She felt a rush of affection so strong it almost hurt. All seemed perfect, a snapshot of the family life she'd only dreamed of for Mia. Then, a sudden commotion near the door caught their attention. A man with a camera slung around his neck, clearly not a parent from the preschool, stood peering into the room. Ms. Linda hurried over, trying to politely ask who he was. He waved some kind of business card, stepping past her with a bright flash from the camera. Jamal's brow furrowed. This was unusual. Reporters rarely bothered with small community events. Unless... Before he could fully register, the man's camera lens swung toward them. Jamal instinctively stepped closer to Mia, heart pounding. Grace, confused, watched as the man snapped a flurry of pictures, ignoring Ms. Linda's protests. Finally, the stranger addressed Jamal directly, voice dripping with self-assured curiosity. "Mr. Douglas, can I get a statement about your family? Are you publicly acknowledging that this is your daughter? The business community would love to—" "Excuse me?" Jamal snapped, tension coiling in his chest. "This is a private event. How did you get in here?" The reporter ignored the question, snapping another shot of Mia, who shrank back in alarm. Grace instantly crouched down, shielding Mia's face. "Stop that!" she hissed. Ms. Linda rushed over with a security guard, but the reporter stood firm, babbling about public interest and major corporate figure with secret child. Parents around them gawked, some stepping in to shield their own children. Jamal's pulse hammered. He had known that being recognized in a public setting could invite attention, but he'd never anticipated a direct ambush here, at Mia's preschool event. He clenched his jaw. "I want you out," he told the guard. "Now." The guard, a tall, burly man, seized the reporter's elbow and tried to escort him away. The man resisted, still calling questions. "When did you know about your daughter, Mr. Douglas? Why keep her hidden for so long?" Anger lit in Jamal's eyes, but he forced himself to stay calm for Mia's sake. The guard finally muscled the reporter toward the door, Ms. Linda issuing apologies to the stunned parents. Grace wrapped an arm around Mia, whose eyes were wide with fear and confusion. "What just happened?" Mia whimpered, looking from Grace to Jamal. Grace's heart twisted. "It's nothing, sweetie, just someone who shouldn't be here." Jamal placed a trembling hand on Mia's shoulder. "Hey, it's okay." He exchanged a troubled look with Grace. In that single glance, they both understood. The protective bubble around their new family life had just burst. Someone had decided Jamal Douglas's private affairs were fair game, and now the media was sniffing around. Within minutes, the entire atmosphere of Family Day soured. Parents whispered in clusters. Ms. Linda attempted to restore normalcy, offering juice and cookies, but the damage was done. Grace cradled Mia's head against her side, trying to calm her, while Jamal apologized to Ms. Linda for the intrusion. The teacher, visibly distressed, assured them it wasn't their fault. Eventually, they decided to leave early. Mia clung to Grace's hand, her excitement obliterated by anxiety. As they navigated the parking lot, Jamal spotted another figure lurking near the entrance, likely another reporter or someone with a phone camera. He quickly guided them to his car, opening the back door for Mia and shielding her from any prying eyes. Inside the vehicle, the doors safely shut. Mia's composure cracked. She burst into tears, wailing about the camera and the man who yelled. Grace hugged her tightly from the back seat, heart aching at how this wonderful day had been ruined. Jamal gripped the steering wheel, fury and guilt boiling in his veins. He had tried to protect them from his high-profile life, but apparently word had leaked. Now Grace and Mia were in the crosshairs of hungry media speculation. He cursed under his breath, then exhaled shakily. "I'm so sorry," he said, voice thick with remorse. Grace exchanged a pained look with him in the rearview mirror. "Let's just get home," she murmured, stroking Mia's hair. "We'll figure this out later." Jamal nodded, starting the engine, determined to shield them from further intrusion, but unsure how to contain a story that could blow wide open at any moment. As they drove away, Mia's sobs quieted, and a heavy silence settled. The magical day they'd envisioned was gone, replaced by a looming question. What happens now when the world learns of the child Jamal never mentioned, and the family he's only just begun to claim? The ride home from Family Day felt painfully quiet. Even Mia, who usually filled every silence with observations and questions, sat with her face pressed against Grace's side in the back seat. Jamal steered the car through streets that blurred into monotony, his mind churning with the aftermath of that intrusive reporter's ambush. He'd promised Mia an afternoon of singing and laughter. Instead, they'd fled an event that was supposed to celebrate families, fled because he was recognized and cornered with invasive questions. Every so often, Jamal glanced into the rearview mirror, catching Grace's anxious expression. She cradled Mia's hand, attempting to soothe her. Mia's eyes still glistened from earlier tears, though she seemed more tired than upset now. Grace offered a reassuring nod in Jamal's direction, but it didn't ease the knot in his chest. At the apartment building, he parked swiftly, scanning the area for any lingering strangers. Thankfully, it appeared clear. He escorted Grace and Mia upstairs, each step taut with unspoken tension. Once inside, Grace locked the door behind them. Jamal exhaled, bracing a hand on the wall. The apartment felt like a sanctuary, but who knew how long it would stay that way if the media started digging deeper? Mia trudged to the couch, pulling a blanket over her small frame. Grace sank beside her, gently stroking her hair. "How are you feeling, baby?" she asked softly. Mia shrugged, hugging a pillow. "That man was scary. He kept taking pictures of us." She looked at Jamal with a flicker of worry. "Why would he do that?" Jamal swallowed, coming to sit on Mia's other side. "Because sometimes people want to know about people in business or celebrities. he explained gently. "They're just looking for a story to sell, even if it hurts others. I'm sorry it happened at your special day." Mia sniffed. "I don't like it." Grace wrapped an arm around her daughter, nodding slowly. "Neither do we, but we're here now, safe. The preschool staff won't let them come back." She glanced at Jamal, her eyes heavy with concern. But this might not be the end of it. Jamal raked a hand through his hair. "I know," he admitted, voice tight. "If one reporter found out about me and Mia, more might follow, especially if they sense a scandal. Gossip headlines love the secret child angle." The last words dripped with self-reproach. He hated how his unintentional absence for years could be twisted into a sensational story. Grace's mouth pressed into a thin line. "We'll handle it. I don't want Mia harassed. She's only 4. Mia looked between them, confusion softening her features. "Will they come here?" she asked, voice trembling. Jamal's heart clenched. He knelt in front of her, gently taking her hands. "I'll do everything I can to stop that," he promised. "I'm going to talk to people at my company, maybe hire someone to keep them away if needed. You shouldn't have to deal with that." Mia nodded, not fully understanding but comforted by his earnestness. Exhaustion from the day's drama weighed on her small body, and Grace guided her to bed early. Jamal hovered in the living room doorway as Grace tucked Mia in, overhearing a few muffled words of reassurance. Before long, Mia succumbed to a restless sleep. Grace emerged, shutting Mia's door gently. She turned to Jamal, arms folded. "You look as upset as I feel." He let out a heavy breath, crossing to the couch. "I'm furious, Grace. Furious that the media is sniffing around something so personal. Furious I wasn't prepared." Grace settled beside him, the cushions sagging under their combined weight. "This was bound to happen. You're a high-profile CEO. People gossip about you even if you sneeze at a corporate event. Now they've discovered Mia." He nodded, hands clasped. "I want to release a clear statement before rumors go wild. But that means telling the world about Mia, and you. I don't want you dragged into a spotlight if you're not ready." She studied him, sorrow and resolve blending in her eyes. "Jamal, we're already dragged in. A statement might help us control the story, at least. But what does that mean for Mia's day-to-day life? Paparazzi at the bus stop? Reporters cornering me at the diner?" Her voice trembled slightly. "I'm used to living quietly." He gripped her hand gently. "We'll protect you. I'll ensure security if needed, or find a safer place to stay. If you want, you could even move in with me, though I know that's a big step. I just want you safe from cameras that might lurk around here." Grace's breath caught. The idea of leaving her cozy but cramped apartment for Jamal's penthouse was daunting, even if it promised more security. She'd always prided herself on independence, forging a life for Mia by her own means. Yet the possibility of daily harassment outside their door chilled her. And for Mia, maybe some changes were necessary. I don't know," she said, voice trembling with uncertainty. "This is all so sudden. And Mia has school near here. I have my job at the diner." Jamal brushed a comforting thumb over her knuckles. "We don't have to decide tonight. But we should prepare for the possibility that the story hits the news soon. The reporter might try to spin it. Wealthy CEO denies child for years or some nonsense." Grace's eyes shone with tears she refused to shed. She hated the thought of Mia eventually reading a headline like that, misunderstanding the reality they were trying to fix. His phone buzzed. Startled, he fished it out. A new message from Parker. "Sir, we have a rumor about a tabloid planning an article. Camille suggests a preemptive statement. Call me when you can." Jamal closed his eyes. "It's already happening," he muttered. "They're printing something soon." Grace inhaled shakily, her hand tightening around his. "Then, you have to do it. Control the narrative. Confirm Mia is your daughter. that you want your privacy respected. Let them see there's no scandal, just a man who learned he has a child and is stepping up." He nodded, features grim. "All right, I'll talk to Camille. We'll craft a statement, something that doesn't expose more details than needed." He hesitated, watching Grace's expression. "But are you okay with me mentioning you?" A flicker of vulnerability crossed her face. "I'm not sure, but we might not have a choice. They'll dig anyway." She sighed, drawing on her reserves of courage. "Just keep it respectful. Don't let them twist me into some gold-digging single mom or imply we had a scandalous affair." Jamal's jaw clenched. "I won't let them degrade you." He stood abruptly, pacing a small circle in the living room. "We can do this carefully. The main thing is making sure Mia's not harassed." Grace rose, stepping closer. "Exactly." She laid a hand on his shoulder. "I trust you to handle it, but you don't have to do it alone." He turned, gaze softening. "Thank you for trusting me." He glanced at Mia's closed bedroom door. "I should probably head to the office first thing tomorrow, handle this statement. Unless you want me to stay the night here for moral support?" She considered, recalling how Mia might feel safer if he were around in the morning. "If you can, yes," she answered quietly. Mia might wake up with nightmares about the cameras. He nodded, resolve shining in his eyes. "Then I'll stay." Despite the day's turmoil, night eventually brought a sense of calm. Grace set up a spare blanket and pillow on the couch, though Jamal dozed fitfully. When the early light crept through the windows, he woke to the sound of gentle footsteps, Grace in the kitchenette, prepping coffee. He stood, stretching stiff muscles, and went to join her. Their eyes met, shadows of worry lingering. She handed him a mug. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning," he echoed, a determined edge beneath his weary tone. "Time to handle this." Mia stumbled out of her bedroom, clutching her plush dinosaur. She blinked in surprise at Jamal, but managed a small smile. "You're still here?" she asked, voice rasping with sleep. He crouched down. "Yes. I wanted to make sure you're okay." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "No bad dreams?" She shook her head, hugging her dinosaur. "No, but I'm scared we can't go to school if those people come back." Grace's heart twisted at that worry. She knelt beside them. "We'll figure it out, baby. We might arrange for me or Jamal to walk you in. Ms. Linda will help keep them out." Mia nodded, hugging her mother's arm. Slowly, a trace of relief warmed the child's expression, seeing both parents standing strong. By 8 a.m., Jamal was on a conference call with Camille and the company's legal team. He spoke from Grace's living room, adopting the calm timbre that soothed anxious board members. The plan: release a brief statement to reputable outlets, confirming that yes, Jamal Douglas had recently discovered he was the father of a 4-year-old girl. He fully embraced the responsibility and asked for privacy, especially for the child. No further details would be given. Anyone harassing or trespassing near the child's home would face legal consequences. After reading the draft aloud, Jamal paused, glancing at Grace. She nodded, eyes steeling with quiet resolve. "Do it," she whispered. He informed the legal team. A flurry of final touches ensued, culminating in a press release scheduled for immediate circulation. Jamal ended the call, exhaling as though he'd run a marathon. "All done," he told Grace. "Now we wait." Grace set down a half-eaten piece of toast, appetite gone. "What happens now?" she asked. He rubbed his temples. "The tabloids might try to spin stories, but at least we're not hiding. If they continue to harass you or Mia, we'll take legal steps." She rose, crossing to the window. Outside, a few cars passed, oblivious to their drama. "And if they dig up everything, like how you left me after that night years ago, or how I raised Mia alone?" Jamal's throat tightened. "Then we stand by the truth. I didn't know about Mia, and once I did, I came back. We won't let them warp our family's story." Grace turned, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. Family's story, she echoed softly. A wave of emotion coursed through her. We really are trying, aren't we? He stepped closer, gently cupping her cheek. Yes, we are. Before more could be said, Mia wandered into the living room, tugging at Grace's sleeve. Mommy, do I have school today? Grace glanced at Jamal. Yes, you do, but we'll walk you in. If any strangers are out there with a camera, we ignore them and go straight inside. Fear flickered in Mia's gaze, but she managed a nod. Okay. Jamal mustered a confident smile, bending to Mia's level. I'll carry your backpack if you want, so you can hold Mommy's hand. She gave a small smile in return. By the time they left the apartment, the press release had been out for half an hour. As they stepped outside, Jamal's heart pounded, expecting a crowd of paparazzi. But the street was mostly empty, only a lone figure reading a newspaper by a parked car. Grace gripped Mia's hand, forging ahead. Jamal remained watchful, but no cameras flashed. Perhaps the tabloids weren't as swift to swarm, or maybe they realized their presence wouldn't yield a sensational headline. They drove to Little Blossoms, nerves stretched taut. Ms. Linda was waiting at the door, scanning for any suspicious activity. Recognizing them, she hurried over, relief brightening her face. No reporters this morning, she whispered. I have the director on alert. We'll keep Mia safe. Grace and Jamal both thanked her. Mia, still subdued, clung to Grace until Ms. Linda coaxed her gently inside. It'll be all right, sweetie, the teacher murmured. Jamal placed a light hand on Mia's shoulder. I'll be here right at 3, okay? We'll do something fun after school. She nodded, offering a tiny wave. Then Mia disappeared into the hallway, her ponytail bouncing. Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Outside, the morning air felt crisp, yet somehow lighter than the previous day. Jamal turned to her. I can drive you to the diner. She nodded slowly. Yes, thanks. They walked back to the car, each step echoing with unspoken questions. Had they done enough? Would the media quiet down or intensify? Grace parted from Jamal at the diner, each wearing a determined expression. They were in this together, no matter the obstacles. Afternoon arrived without fresh drama, though social media buzzed with mentions of Jamal's statement. A few tabloids posted headlines, CEO confirms secret daughter, asks for privacy. Some gossip blogs speculated on Grace's identity, but the release offered no details. The situation remained in a tense lull, an uneasy peace that could break at any moment. Jamal picked Mia up from preschool as promised, breathing relief when he found no prying cameras or strangers on site. Mia greeted him with a shy smile, hugging her backpack. She said, "Everyone in class asked if you're on TV now." She wrinkled her nose. "I told them you're my daddy, not a movie star." He chuckled softly. "That's right, not a star, just your dad." They headed back to Grace's place, where she arrived shortly after, greeting them with the same anxious relief. Over a simple dinner, they exchanged updates. No further press intrusion, no calls from frantic co-workers. Mia eventually fell asleep, the day's tension draining her little body. In the living room, Grace and Jamal lingered once more. He stared at the glowing window, aware that eyes could be out there or might be soon. But for now, the city's bustle felt distant. Grace curled into his side, her voice a murmur. "I guess we're out in the open now." He stroked her hair. "Yes, but maybe that's okay. We can finally live without hiding, even if it means dealing with occasional curiosity." She nodded, pressing her cheek to his chest. "As long as Mia's safe, I can deal with curiosity." Silence settled, warm and reassuring. At length Grace looked up, her eyes a mix of courage and fondness. "Thank you for not running from this," she whispered. Jamal bent to brush a tender kiss against her lips. "I'd never run from you or Mia," he promised, voice thick. "Never again." And in that moment, despite the uncertain future, the high-powered life Jamal couldn't completely escape, and the media scrutiny that might flare up at any point, Grace believed him, because the love blossoming among them was stronger than any rumor or headline could break. They had found one another across years of absence and secrets. Now, they stood on the threshold of a life built on truth, acceptance, and the promise that they'd stand together in the face of whatever came next. And that, in itself, was enough to fill the modest apartment with hope as another day faded into night. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.